Chapter 1369. Back then, Qin Yang had hoped that Xia Chen would die in the hands of the Ghost Clan. However, the Ghost Clan did not appear. Only the current generation came. In the end, they were all killed by Xia Chen, which made him even more powerful. Since Ling Xiao wanted to avenge Xia Chen, Qi Luo no longer had any reservations. In the entire Azure continent, the only force that could go against the World Lord Palace was the Taigu Ling people. For 300 years, Qi Luo had been keeping this a secret and enduring the torment in her heart. Now, it seemed that her wishes had influenced the gods. Finally, the young master of the Ling people, who was willing to avenge Xia Chen, had come. Of course, Qi Luo had no doubts about Ling Zhao's identity. After all, a young man who dared to go against the World Lord Palace was either retarded or had enough confidence. Since Ling Xiao could come here, it proved that he had an identity that even the Jade Lake sacred leader was wary of. The Jade Lake's ancestors said that men were not allowed to enter the ancestral hall. The young man in front of her was only an honorable. How could he make the sacred leader break the rules? The Jade Lake did not dare to offend the Taigu Ling people. Ling Xiao might be the only chance to avenge Xia Chen. Therefore, the rules in this world had always been set for the weak. The strong were strong because they had always broken the rules. So he found you and used the Jade Lake's sacred ground to threaten you. He asked you to attack Xia Chen and accuse him of colluding with the Ghost Clan? Ling Zhao's eyes were clear. He finally understood the whole story. The successor of the Shadow Soul Palace was like the young master of the Ling people. To these prodigies, it was like a mountain that could not be climbed. The path to immortality was dark and the strong preyed on the weak. At the end of the day, why were those who started from humble beginnings and eventually reached the top of the world said that they were blessed with great luck? Because if it were not for luck, no one would be able to fight their way to the top of the world on their own. How many of these heirs and young masters who had grown up in the Overlord clan's aristocratic families were merciful and not scheming? In other words, among those sects and clans that had been passed down for 100,000 years or even several 100,000 years, how many of them were brainless when they became supremes? Could the successor chosen by these people be an arrogant, despotic, and ignorant idiot who only knew how to stir up trouble? Thus, Xia Chen's death was inevitable. This was because his vision could not be compared to a descendant of the Seventh Palace. The reason why he was able to rise again was because he had died once and learned about the dangers of the path to immortality. Therefore, do you think that after being reborn, the god of slaughter, the venerable immortal, would be a kind-hearted person who would heal the wounded and save the dying? They had experienced the betrayal of their loved ones and close friend. How could they easily trust anyone? Killing all the way without any emotions. Rising up against the heavens was the path that Lu Tianming should take. That's right. Qi Luo closed her eyes in despair. Back then, if Qin Yang had not threatened her with the Jade Lake sacred ground, she would not have had the heart to kill her true love with her own hands. Qin Yang has a guardian behind him, who is a high-grade heavenly sovereign. Many of the ancestors of the Jade Lake sacred ground are no match for him. I see. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. He had guessed that Qin Yang's identity was not simple. Now, it seemed that the background of the new master of the God-slaying temple was more terrifying than Ling Xiao had imagined. However, given Mystic Butterfly's cultivation, no one in the first stage of Heavenly Sovereign should be a match for her. Thus, Ling Xiao only needed to intimidate those old fogies of the God-slaying temple. A mere guardian would not be able to stir up any trouble. Young master, although you were coerced, you are still guilty. Now I will give you a chance to redeem yourself. Ling Zhao's face was cold, and he did not soften his heart because of Qi Luo's remorse. No matter what, she was the murderer of Xia Chen. Based on this point alone, the top powers of the God-slaying temple would not forgive her easily. A chance to redeem myself? Qi Luo's eyes trembled slightly. She had already guessed Ling Zhao's intention. However, Qin Yang had been in charge of the god-slaying temple for 300 years. Those who did not obey him must have been suppressed or even killed by him. Although Ling Xiao was the young master of the Taigu Ling people, he was still an outsider. How could he contend with the top powers of the god-slaying temple and Shadow Soul Hall? That's right. I have ordered Elder Yu to gather the old subordinates of Xiachen. I am afraid that they have already killed their way to the Green Jade Mountain. I need you to come with me and expose this past in front of everyone in the god-slaying temple. Ling Xiao had already planned this out when he knew about the existence of the god-slaying temple. Be it Yu Yi or Qi Luo, they were just his assistants in controlling this ancient sect. In fact, at this moment, he did not care at all. How many people in the god-slaying temple believed Qi Luo? In short, all he wanted was an excuse, a logical reason to kill Qin Yang. If he could lure out the true experts of the Shadow Soul Hall, it would be a great fortune for Ling Xiao. After all, if he faced the 7 palaces directly, even the Ling people would suffer some losses. Eliminating them one by one was the best way to destroy the Realm Lord's temple. When the Realm Lord returned and found that the top powers who had followed him were all dead, he would definitely be very surprised. At this moment, Ling Xiao finally understood why the top powers of the god-slaying temple would appear in the immortal Phoenix ancient dynasty, attack Gu Chaoxiai, and shift the blame to the Shenwu dynasty. The Realm Lord's minions were originally the opposite of the Ling people. At this moment, Ling Xiao was even more certain that the Realm Lord's disappearance must be related to something else. He must be hiding somewhere and silently observing the situation in the Azure continent. Then, when the world was in chaos, he would use his supreme power to suppress all races and suppress all the ancient sects that had not been eradicated 100,000 years ago. This kind of strategy could no longer be considered a conspiracy, but a true overt one. Even though everyone knew the Realm Master's goal, no one was willing to give up this opportunity to control the heavens. But, that heavenly supreme expert, Saintess Qi Luo, you don't have to worry about this. Since I dared to come to the Jade Lake sacred ground, I am naturally not afraid of Qin Yang. Ling Xiao looked up at the ancestral hall, at the many ancestral tablets of the Jade Lake ancestors. Qi Luo, I have always been curious. Why are you not dead? Qi Luo's expression changed slightly, and she felt a chill run down her spine. At this moment, she suddenly realized that this young man who looked to be in his early 20s was even more scheming than Qin Yang. That's right, the reason why she was not dead was not because Qin Yang took pity on her, but because there was something else. However, who would care about her life or death? Or rather, who would suspect that she was not killed by Qin Yang? Is it because of the god-slaying imprint? Ling Xiao suddenly lowered his head, and a smile bloomed on his gentle face. However, even though he was smiling, Qi Luo felt a chill run down her spine. How do you know? Other than that, I can't think of any other reason why Qin Yang did not kill you. Ling Xiao shook his head. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and he looked like an immortal emperor who had stood at the top of the world for countless years. In his eyes, time, emotions, and conflicts were just clouds and mist that would disperse with a touch. Chapter 1370. Yu Yi had said that the god of slaughter's inheritance was in Embark. Although this expert had died in the river of time and the god of slaughter palace that he had founded had fallen apart, Chun Chun had returned to the god of slaughter palace. Although he was only an emperor god, he was able to rebuild the god of slaughter palace and gain the loyalty of many experts. Therefore, Ling Xiao guessed that this mark was similar to the soul mark. Not only did it contain boundless killing power, but it could also retain the consciousness of many experts of the god of slaughter palace. Of course, this was only Ling Xiao's guess. However, after knowing that Qi Luo had returned to the Jade Lake sacred ground, Ling Xiao was even more certain of his guess. Who was Qin Yang? He was the successor of the Shadow Palace who had planned for decades and killed his close friend to achieve his goal. Given his character, would he let a woman who knew all his secrets return to the sect? In a sense, Qin Yang's character was similar to Ling Xiao's. The only difference was that Qin Yang's plan was flawed. On the other hand, Ling Xiao would never let others control the variables. The reason why Qi Luo was still alive was definitely not because of love. A woman who had betrayed her true love did not deserve to be doted on. Therefore, she must have something that Qin Yang did not dare to kill her. The God of Slaughter seal. Qin Yang had done his best to replace Xia Chen in order to gain the loyalty of the experts of the God of Slaughter Palace. However, if he did not have the God of Slaughter seal, he would lose the loyalty of this faction if he was exposed one day. Therefore, there was only one reason why Qi Luo was still alive. The God of Slaughter seal was in her hands. Panic flashed across Qi Luo's eyes. Then, she nodded slightly. Yes, it's because of the God of Slaughter seal. At this moment, she increasingly felt that Ling Xiao's temperament was too frightening. This young man seemed to have calculated the cause and effect of everything. In front of him, Qi Luo was completely naked. There was no privacy at all. I promised Xia Chen that I would take the God of Slaughter Palace back from Qin Yang. Now that I have found his daughter, this seal should be in her hands. Ling Xiao had no intention of discussing with Qi Luo. He could get all the answers by searching her soul. However, since Qin Yang did not do so, it was obvious that Qi Luo had something to rely on. Can I trust you? Qi Luo hesitated for a moment. She did not have the courage to disobey the young master of the Ling people. However, if his goal was the same as Qin Yang's, which was to obtain the Godly Slayer's inheritance, then what was the difference between giving him the Godly Slayer's seal and giving it to Qin Yang? You don't have to give me this imprint, and you don't have to tell me where it is. I will help Xia Chen's daughter get rid of all obstacles. At that time, you only need to pass it on to her in front of everyone, and everything will come to light. Ling Xiao said indifferently with an extremely calm expression. What a joke. Ling Xiao had long since planted a soul imprint in Xia Zhiming's soul sea. There was no difference whether the killing god imprint was given to her or to Ling Xiao. What he wanted was to truly control the power in his hands, not the empty title of killing the Shrine Master. After all, the mortal realm was not the end of the path to immortality. Breaking the Jiutian chessboard and escaping the control of the ancient gods was Ling Xiao's true goal. Why are you doing this? Qi Luo stood up and looked at Ling Xiao with a serious expression. Even with the Taigu Ling People's Foundation, they would be in endless trouble if they offended the Realm Lord Palace. Qi Luo had seen enough of the dangers of the path to immortality over the years. She did not believe that anyone would offend the Realm Lord Palace for no reason. What was the young master of the Ling people plotting? I, Ling Xiao, have never explained my actions to anyone. If you don't believe me, why ask me? As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao actually turned around without hesitation, intending to leave. If Qi Luo did not feel guilty, Ling Xiao would not have wasted so much time acting with her. However, the Jade Lake Saintess had guarded the ancestral hall alone for 300 years. It was obvious that she was full of regret. Ling Xiao did not believe that she would let go of this opportunity to avenge Xia Chen. Young master. As expected, just as Ling Xiao reached the door, Qi Luo's shout came from behind him. Young master, please wait for a moment. I am willing to believe you. There was no longer any hesitation on Qi Luo's face. That's right, if she allowed Ling Xiao to leave today, it would seem that he had no intention of letting the matter rest. In other words, he would kill his way to the Green Jade Mountain and kill Qingyang with his own hands even without Qi Luo. Although this matter had nothing to do with her, would the Realm Lord Palace believe her? In the end, the Jade Lake sacred ground would still be hated. She might even offend the Taigu Ling people unknowingly. Now, she could only choose one faction. Only then would she be able to protect her sect in this conflict. She had completely given up on Qingyang. Ling Zhao's domineering and direct behavior today made her put down her worries. Okay. Ling Xiao nodded and walked out of the ancestral hall. He saw Li Wantong waiting on the mountain path. She had not left at all. Senior sister Li? Young master, how is it, my senior sister? Li Wantong was nervous. She was worried that Qi Luo's temper would offend this young master. Don't worry. Qi Luo has decided to leave with me. Ling Xiao smiled warmly and his eyes were clear. Calculating the time, Yu Yi and the others should have already killed their way to the Green Jade Mountain. And this game of chess had finally reached the stage where it was time to end it. Poor Xia Chen. Even though he had died 1,000 times, he was still exerting his remaining strength. Respectable, lamentable. Ah! Senior sister, she. Li Wantong exclaimed. Then, she saw the door of the hall open. A graceful figure in green slowly walked over. Her hair was like a waterfall and her face was haggard. But somehow, it added a bit of delicate beauty. Li Wantong's expression froze and her mouth opened slightly. She had never seen such a beautiful senior sister. Seeing this, Ling Xiao raised an eyebrow and turned around. He was also surprised. Qi Luo was the Jade Lake's saint after all. Before Gu Chaoxiai was born, she was the prettiest of the humankind. Even though 300 years had passed, she was still beautiful and pitiful. Young master, let's go. Qi Luo's red lips trembled and she looked a little flustered. She knew very well that she would not be able to come back. But compared to struggling at death's door, death was a relief. Senior sister, where are you going? Li Wantong looked at Ling Xiao curiously. She heard that her senior sister was trapped by love and was willing to give up. Why did she regain her vigor when she saw young master today? Could it be, I am going to atone for my sins? Qi Luo's red lips curled up. Wantong, I will leave the Jade Lake sacred ground to you in the future. Go and tell master that I will no longer have anything to do with the Jade Lake sacred ground. Young master, I hope you will take care of me in the future. Then, Qi Luo bowed deeply to Ling Xiao. The moment she stepped out, mist began to spread around her. As for her figure, she resolutely walked towards the distant mountains. Chapter 1371. Green Jade Mountain was an ancient mountain range located at the border of extreme lightning land. As the mountain had a sea of lightning at its back and towered above the clouds, very few people would come here to train. Of course, as the most mysterious force in Qingtsang, Killing Shrine was between good and evil, so it was reasonable for them to choose this place as their sect. At this moment, a huge star suddenly fell from Green Jade Mountain, and the divine restriction was activated. The originally peaceful ancient mountain suddenly burst into a dazzling golden light. A shocking aura swept across the sky, breaking the tranquility of the mountain. Then, many figures appeared in the sky. Although there were not many of them, each of them had a powerful cultivation. Especially the old man who was leading them, who had reached the heavenly sovereign level. The heavenly sovereign's aura poured over thousands of miles, shaking the sky. It was like a huge sun, blooming with monstrous blood qi. Beside the old man stood two young and beautiful ladies. One of them had a cold face and a calm expression, but her eyes were filled with uncontrollable excitement. There was a mysterious fluctuation around her, as if there was a celestial gate that was connected to the other side of reincarnation. The other person also had outstanding looks, but there was a hint of nervousness on her face. Behind the three of them stood three old men in different clothes. Their auras were melodious and surging, and the one with the lowest cultivation level had reached the earthly sovereign level. Who dares to be presumptuous in Killing Shrine? Angry shouts resounded on Green Jade Mountain. Then, countless figures walked out from all over the sacred mountain and stood in front of the hall at the top of the mountain. Haha, great elder, long time no see. You don't even recognize your old friends? Unlike ordinary sects, Killing Shrine had been destroyed in the long river of history. If Xia Chun had not obtained the Killing God mark and the ancient Killing God's inheritance, it would have been difficult for this force to reappear. Therefore, Killing Shrine had no foundation to speak of. The generation of elders was the strongest fighting force in the palace. The great elder of Killing Shrine was called Pang Yun. His cultivation level was also at the heavenly sovereign level, 2 levels higher than Yue. You are Yue. You are still alive. Pang Yun's eyes trembled as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. That's right. Just as Qi Luo had expected, during these 300 years, Qin Yang had secretly suppressed all the experts of the Slaughter Shrine who were loyal to Xia Chun. The remaining fence-sitters also chose to submit under Qin Yang's remaining might. As for First Elder Pang Yun, he was Qin Yang's most loyal servant. At the same time, he was also the only expert in the Killing God Palace who knew of Qin Yang's identity. Xia Chen's death back then was full of doubts. How could a young man who had killed countless Ghost Clan prodigies join forces with the Ghost Clan behind their backs? However, the path to immortality was just so cruel and merciless. No one would throw their life away for a dead person. Not to mention, Xia Chun had only found the exterminating God mark a few years ago. Many of those powerhouses who came because of his reputation had ulterior motive. On the other hand, Qin Yang's methods were far more brutal and terrifying than Xia Chen's. Thus, the final outcome of this matter was left unsettled. Only Yue, a supreme being who didn't belong to the godly slaying palace, didn't believe that Xia Chun would collude with the ghost race and go against Qin Yang. However, with his strength alone, how could he fight against the entire Killing Deity Hall? In the end, he also disappeared. The turbulence finally came to an end. Originally, Pang Yun thought that with Qin Yang's temperament, he would definitely not let go of someone who resisted like Yue. However, he didn't expect that this supreme being, who was also proficient in assassination, would return to the Green Jade Mountain after 300 years. Moreover, he did it in such an open and above-board manner. Could it be that he had found a new backer? Pang Yun smiled coldly. Although he was surprised, he didn't panic. After all, with Qin Yang's identity, who in the Green Jade Mountain would dare to go against him? Thanks to First Elder, I'm still alive. Yue snorted coldly as his gaze swept across the many powerhouses of the Killing God Palace before him. This faction originally had 11 elders, and 9 of them were supreme beings. However, there were only 7 people standing beside Pang Yun now. 1 heavenly supreme being, 3 earthly supreme beings, and the remaining 3 saints. With such strength, they could be compared to the top factions in the Green Jade Mountain. Yue, why are you here today? Pang Yun wasn't in a hurry to make a move. The confrontation between 2 heavenly supreme beings could easily destroy the world. Moreover, the Killing God Palace was a hidden faction. Once the 2 of them made a move, it would definitely attract many people's attention. Does First Elder not know why I'm here? Yue shook his head and smiled. He reached out his hand and pushed Bai Ling to the front of the crowd. This will be the new master of the Killing God Palace. Yue and Xia Zhiming now had a soul seal planted by Ling Xiao. In other words, even if Yue had doubts, he wouldn't dare to disobey. Moreover, Xia Zhiming's talent was indeed not the best in the Green Jade Mountain. The greatest disaster in the world was always unworthy of the position. Therefore, he didn't have much objection to Bai Ling taking over the position of the Killing God Palace Master. As long as he could avenge Xia Chun today, Ling Xiao would be his and Xia Zhiming's greatest benefactor. Yue, what nonsense are you talking about? Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Pang Yun's face was gloomy. His supreme being aura surged and turned into clouds thousands of miles long, stirring up the sun and the moon. Instantly, the void trembled and the great Tao fluctuated. Even the disciples of the Killing God Palace felt their divine souls trembling and on the verge of shattering. What's the commotion? However, just as the 2 sides were about to draw their swords, a gentle and indifferent voice suddenly came from the main hall. When he heard the voice, Yu Yi's face was instantly filled with resentment and anger. His aura was almost uncontrollable. In front of the main hall, a handsome young man in a golden robe slowly walked out with a gentle and calm smile on his face. Although there wasn't a trace of fluctuation on his body, there was a kind of natural aura that could crush heaven and earth, as if he was the only one in the world. In particular, his deep and dark eyes were like two whirlpools in the sea of stars. There were no ripples in his eyes, but they were deep and terrifying. Qin Yang. Yui clenched his teeth and couldn't help but clench his fists. In the eyes of others, Qin Yang had always been humble and amiable. He was a righteous and outstanding person. However, only Yui knew how this seemingly gentle young man had killed all the followers related to Xiachen in order to take control of the Killing God Palace. This was a devil, a sinister person with two faces. Oh? You are Senior Yui? Qin Yang's eyes narrowed slightly. There wasn't a trace of panic on his face. Instead, his smile widened. Senior Yui, I've been looking for you very hard. Qin Yang, put away your hypocritical face. Today is the day you die. Yui took a deep breath and turned to Bai Ling beside him. Miss Bai Ling, yes. Bai Ling's pretty face was cold as she nodded slightly. In the next moment, a ray of blood suddenly bloomed and filled the sky. The entire green jade mountain fell into a dead silence. Chapter 1372. This is the soul-sucking ghost pearl. Why is this evil item in the hands of this little girl? Instantly, the entire Qing Yao mountain was in an uproar. Regardless of whether it was the elders or disciples of the Killing Divine Hall, they were all shocked. Back then, Qin Yang had confirmed that Xiachen had colluded with the Ghost Clan because of this item. However, why would this pearl appear in the hands of a human girl? Originally, everyone thought that Qin Yang would definitely take the pearl after killing Xiachen. Although no one had seen him use this treasure in the past 300 years, it was impossible for him to use it. However, it shouldn't be. Could it be that Xiachen was not dead? No wonder Yui dared to show up at the Qing Yao Mountain today. With Xiachen's talent, he must have entered the Saint Realm after 300 years. Could it be that they were here for revenge? The soul-sucking ghost pearl. However, at this moment, even though Qin Yang was slightly surprised, he still didn't panic. He was no longer the outsider who had stolen the position of the Killing Divine Hall Master 300 years ago. The Killing Divine Hall was now his force. Even if someone had doubts, they would not dare to make an enemy out of him. Moreover, with the support of the First Elder, what could those earthly sovereigns and Saint Realm elders do? Qin Yang, you framed Xiachen and took over the Killing Divine Hall. Today, I will expose your hypocrisy and evil deeds in front of all the disciples of the Killing Divine Hall. Yui shouted angrily, his expression agitated. He had waited for this day for 300 years. In these 300 years, he had always hoped that he could return to the Killing Divine Hall one day and seek justice for Xiachen. Of course, if it was not for Ling Xiao, even if he was a heavenly sovereign, he would not have been able to enter the Qing Yao Mountain. However, it was different now. Everything was different. Since Lord Ling Xiao swore on his Taoist heart that he would avenge Xiachen, then today, Qin Yang would definitely die. Elder Yu, you seem to be very confident. Then, I would like to hear what evil deeds you want to expose me for. Qin Yang shook his head and smiled casually. As long as he wanted, he could order the disciples to kill this group of reckless fools on the spot. However, the sudden appearance of the soul-sucking ghost pearl made him somewhat worried. He wanted to know if Xiachen had died or not. Otherwise, if this fellow was given too much time to grow, it would become a great disaster in the future. One must know that even though Qin Yang was extremely talented, he was still no match for Xiachen back then. If Qi Luo had not stabbed Xiachen in the back, it would have been difficult for him to be a match for the Killer God's successor. More importantly, although Qin Yang had seized the Killing God Palace in the end, the two supreme treasures on Xia Chen's body had not fallen into his hands. The soul-sucking ghost pearl and the mark of the exterminating god were both top treasures in the azure sky. However, he couldn't find any of them. Back then, you slandered Xia Chen for colluding with the Ghost Clan and said that this pearl was evidence. But in reality, this ghost pearl was obtained by Xia Chen after he killed the third successor of the Ghost Clan to avenge my child. Furthermore, he did not cultivate any evil technique. All of this was nothing but a false accusation made up by you. Yu Yi's words were cold. These words had been hidden in his heart for 300 years. Now that he was able to spit it out in front of everyone from the Killing God Temple, he felt incomparably carefree. False accusation made up? Qin Yang shook his head. His expression suddenly turned serious. Senior Yu Yi, I understand your feelings for Xia Chen. However, there are some things that you may not know. Xia Chen and I were as close as brothers. Even if he cultivated an evil technique, how could I be so heartless as to kill him? At the very least, I would have given him a chance to turn over a new leaf. What? What do you mean by that? Yu Yi was stunned. He instinctively felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. Sigh. Actually, the Xia Chen that I killed was no longer the real Xia Chen. A wisp of the successor of the Ghost Clan's divine soul was hidden in this ghost pearl. He had completely controlled Xia Chen's physical body. Qin Yang sighed softly. His tone was extremely sorrowful. This was something that Holy Maiden Qi Luo and I personally verified. Otherwise, why do you think the Holy Maiden would help me kill Xia Chen? That's right. Holy Maiden Qi Luo and Xia Chen were in love with each other. They were like a pair of immortals. Back then, she was the one who severely injured Xia Chen and forced him to use the soul-sucking ghost pearl to reveal the truth. Yu Yi, I think you're the real hypocrite. Angry shouts came from the front of the hall. Yu Yi's face turned pale almost instantly. His lips trembled slightly, and he did not know how to refute. The successor of the Ghost Clan's methods were originally strange and unpredictable. He was good at divine soul technique. Now that Xia Chen was dead, there was no evidence. There was no way to prove it. Of course, Qin Yang's actions were just a test. Given Xia Chen's temperament, if he was not dead, he would definitely appear to prove his innocence. As long as he dared to appear on Green Jade Mountain, Qin Yang had 100 ways to kill him on the spot with his current method. You! Yu Yi's body trembled, and his face was extremely ferocious. He had long expected Qin Yang to be shameless, but it seemed that he had underestimated him. Senior Yu Yi, I respect your loyalty. How about this? You and the other elders enter the godly killing palace again. I have always kept the elder positions for you. Qin Yang smiled warmly as his gaze swept over the people behind Yu Yi. These people were once Xia Chen's followers. He had been secretly suppressing them all these years, but there were still a few fish that escaped the net. On the other hand, the two young girls had peerless looks and unique temperament. Unfortunately, they were young. Could they be Xia Chen's descendants? Dream on. Today, even if I die, I will avenge Xia Chen. Yu Yi took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. Qin Yang shook his head and smiled. In the next moment, monstrous killing intent flashed in his eyes. Yu Yi, it seems that you are still stubborn. Since this soul-sucking ghost pearl has appeared, could it be that you have colluded with the Ghost Clan? I respect you as a senior. If you can kill the owner of this pearl and hand it over to me, I may consider letting you live. Otherwise, today, all of you will die together. Qin Yang sneered. In front of him, spiritual light lit up around the 7 elders of the godly killing palace. In an instant, divine power filled the sky and the killing intent covered the sun. The originally clear sky fell into darkness. You don't even think about it. Yu Yi gritted his teeth. At this moment, he was also slightly flustered. With their strength, it was impossible for them to be a match for the experts of the godly killing palace. Now, the only person he could count on was Lord Ling Xiao. Clap, clap, clap. However, just as Qin Yang waved his hand and was about to give the order to attack, the sound of clapping suddenly came from the distant sky. Interesting, this is really interesting. I didn't expect there to be such a shameless person in this world. Everyone's expression froze when they heard the voice. Even Qin Yang's eyes flashed with fear. Chapter 1373. The mark of the Godly Slayer Palace was the symbol of the Godly Slayer Palace Master. However, even though Qin Yang had the title of Palace Master, he still could not obtain the inheritance in the mark. After he killed Xia Chen, he had thought of eliminating Qi Luo as well. However, that woman told him that the mark of the Godly Slayer was in her hands. That was why Qi Luo was spared. She had been using that as an excuse to stay away from the Jade Lake sacred ground. Qin Yang had thought of capturing her and searching her soul to find the whereabouts of the mark of the Godly Slayer. However, when he used the Jade Lake sacred ground to threaten Qi Luo, he had made a Dao heart oath with her. As long as Qi Luo did not betray him, he could not do anything to the Jade Lake sacred ground and Qi Luo. Otherwise, he would be punished by the heavenly Tao and would be doomed eternally. That was why Qi Luo was hesitant when facing Ling Xiao just now. If she broke the oath and Qin Yang was not killed by Ling Xiao, the Jade Lake sacred ground would only end up in a miserable state. Of course, the so-called Tao Heart Oath had an inexplicable effect on these immortal cultivators. As for Ling Xiao, it did not affect him at all. His divine soul was not from this world, and his cultivation depended on the system. There were no bottlenecks or shackles. When Qin Yang heard the voice in the sky, a trace of murderous intent rose in his heart. Xia Chen, you are still alive. However, just as everyone's hearts were filled with fear and shock, they saw a figure slowly walking over from above the clouds. A sea of stars surged for 90,000 miles, dazzling and dazzling. Endless starlight shone on the ground, and five-colored divine light filled the sky. The runes of the great Tao evolved as if an immortal god had descended. At the end of the sea of stars, a handsome young man in black stood with his hands behind his back. There was a calm smile on his face. He stood in the sky and his aura surged. He was in harmony with heaven and earth. Even the supreme beings had the urge to kneel down and worship him. It's not Xia Chen. Qin Yang frowned slightly, and a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. However, just as he was about to speak, he saw a beautiful figure in green walk out from behind the young man. She was graceful and beautiful, but somewhat haggard. Qi Luo? It's Saintess Qi Luo. Instantly, the entire Qinyao mountain was in an uproar. Although they had heard of Ling Xiao's name, they had never seen him in person. However, Qi Luo was inextricably linked to the Killing God Palace. That woman was once the most beloved woman of the Godslayer Palace's Palace Master Xia Chen. Yet, she was also the person who had personally killed Xia Chen. Originally, everyone thought that she would have a relationship with Qin Yang, the new master of the Godslayer Temple. However, to everyone's surprise, when Qin Yang ascended to the position of the Killing God Palace Master, Qi Luo returned to the Jade Lake Saint ground with the excuse of being seriously ill. Who would have thought that when Yu Yi and the others went up the mountain today, the Jade Lake Saint would also appear? Is it a coincidence, or is chaos coming? Qi Luo. Qin Yang frowned slightly, and for the first time, a gloomy look appeared in his eyes. It was not because of Qi Luo, but because of the black-robed youth beside her. The dark golden patterns on the robe were like mountains, rivers, the sun, and the moon rising alternately. It was inexplicably shocking. What Palace Master Qin Yang said just now was really wonderful. He pushed all the blame to a dead person. It was really impeccable. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He had played Qin Yang's tricks too many times. Unfortunately, his flaw was on Qi Luo. However, he was bound by the Tao Heart Oath and allowed such a flaw to exist for 300 years. However, compared to Qi Luo, Qin Yang's strength was not weak now. He was a first-grade saint. Although he was slightly older than Gu Chaoxiai, he was still in the same generation. Therefore, if the Killing God Palace was not so mysterious, Qin Yang should be one of the top ones among the 100 talents of the human race. Qin Yang pretended to be surprised, but the gloominess in his eyes could not be concealed. As for his identity, Qi Luo knew about it. Today, if she dared to break the Tao Heart Oath, Qin Yang could easily kill her and find the whereabouts of the Killing God imprint from her soul sea. As for the Jade Lake sacred ground, Qin Yang only needed to give the order, and this sacred ground would be completely destroyed in the long river of history. However, looking at Qi Luo's expression, it was obvious that he did not come with good intentions. Who exactly was this young man to give Qi Luo such confidence? All of a sudden, Qin Yang thought of someone. In the entire Qing Tsang continent, only the Taigu Ling people or the successors of the Four Powers would dare to make an enemy of the Shadow Soul Palace. Looking at this young man's appearance and bearing, he was quite similar to the rumored young master of the Ling people. Qin Yang did not expect him to be friends with Qi Luo. Palace Master Qin Yang said just now that he wants Elder Yu to kill the owner of this blood pearl? Ling Xiao reached out and grabbed the soul-sucking ghost pearl. This bead is mine, Yi Futian said. Oh! Qin Yang smiled playfully and his eyes became gloomier. So, young Master Ling is here today to find trouble with me? Young Master Ling? Hearing this, the faces of the Killing Shrine's powerhouses froze, and they looked at Ling Xiao with fear. The Killing Shrine was as its name suggested. Although the cultivation of the group of elders and disciples in front of them was not necessarily stronger than those of the top clans in the Qing Tsang continent, they were still very powerful. However, the true strength of this faction was their control of darkness, their spies placed all over the Qing Tsang continent, and their assassination technique. To put it bluntly, if a saint from the Killing Shrine was hidden in the dark, even an ordinary supreme martial artist would be extremely wary. However, no matter how terrifying the Killing Shrine was, it was still nothing in front of the Taigu Ling people. Why did Qi Luo bring the young master of the Ling people to the Green Jade Mountain today? Looking at their expressions, they probably had other motives. Could it be that the scene from 300 years ago was going to repeat itself? Find trouble. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and revealed a bitter smile. Everyone knows that I, Ling Xiao, have never liked to cause trouble, but Ling Xiao changed the topic, and his face suddenly turned cold. If someone is arrogant and runs amok, I don't mind sending him to reincarnation. Oh? Runs amok? Young master, you came to the Killing Shrine to find trouble with the Ghost Clan's treasure, and you actually said that others are running amok. Qin Yang did not care about Ling Xiao's threat at all. The Taigu Ling people were strong, so strong that they could be compared to the World Lord Palace. However, if this ancient clan really had the strength to fight against the World Lord Palace, why did they hide from the world for 100,000 years? It could only be said that they were not strong enough. At the very least, Qin Yang did not fear Ling Xiao like the other geniuses of the other clans. Most of the villains had powerful backgrounds, without exception. I found this ghost pearl in a secret realm, and when I found it, there was still a remnant soul in it. He told me. Ling Xiao's eyes swept across the group of Killing Shrine members, and a bright smile suddenly appeared on his face. His name is Xia Chen. What? The entire Green Jade Mountain suddenly fell into a dead silence. At this moment, everyone's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. If what Qin Yang said was true, then the remnant soul in the Ghost Pearl should belong to the third descendant of the Ghost Clan. Xia Chen? What kind of secret was hidden in this tragedy from 300 years ago? Chapter 1374. Xia Chen. Qin Yang exclaimed exaggeratedly. Young master, you're so naive. Xia Chen was killed by the successor of the Ghost Clan a long time ago. Saintess Qi Luo was the one who told me about it. You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Ling Xiao turned to look at Qi Luo. Qi Luo immediately understood what he meant and walked to the front of the Massacre Divine Hall's experts. Seniors, 300 years ago, Qin Yang threatened me with the Jade Lake sacred ground and forced me to severely injure Xia Chen. This ghost pearl was obtained by Palace Master Xia Chen after he killed the third successor of the Ghost Clan. I swear on my Dao heart that what Qi Luo said today is true. Ha ha, Qi Luo, you're so stubborn. You betrayed Xia Chen and now you're betraying me. The Massacre Divine Hall's elders fell silent again when they heard Qi Luo's words. They had their suspicions about what happened 300 years ago. However, Qin Yang was too ruthless. Now that he had the support of the first elder, no one in the Massacre Divine Hall dared to go against him. Moreover, Xia Chen was dead, and Qin Yang had proven his innate talent in the past 300 years. If they followed him, the Massacre Divine Hall would be able to regain its glory. Qin Yang, you're despicable and shameless. Even if I die today, I'll avenge Xia Chen. Qi Luo was agitated. She suddenly lifted her hand and took a white jade hairpin off her head and crushed it. Instantly, a piercingly cold, murderous aura descended with a loud rumble. Runes appeared and divine radiance gushed out. The entire space instantly collapsed. This is the Massacre God Seal? The Massacre God Seal. Why is this seal in Qi Luo's hands? This time, the Massacre Divine Hall's elders could no longer maintain their calm. This seal was left behind by the Massacre God. Not only did it contain the ancient Massacre God's inheritance, but it was also a symbol of the Massacre Divine Hall's master's identity. Elders, this seal was given to me by Xia Chen when he was alive. Now, I'm returning it to his descendants. I hope you can follow the teachings of the Massacre Divine Hall's ancestors and recognize who the master of the Massacre Divine Hall is. Qi Luo's eyes were red. She turned to Yue. Senior Yu, may I ask who's Miss Xia? Give it to me. Bai Ling said indifferently. She raised her hand and snatched the Killing God imprint. She and Ling Xiao both held the soul seal, so Yue and Xia Jimeng didn't dare to refute at all. After doing all this, Qi Luo heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Qi Luo, you are still so innocent. From the beginning until the end, Qin Yang didn't panic at all, and there was even a wisp of ridicule on his face. If you had taken out this seal 300 years ago and told these lies, perhaps you might have been able to elect a puppet to the position of the God of Slaughter Palace's master. But now, Qin Yang shook his head and raised his head to look at the black-clothed young man. The God-killing palace belongs to me, Qin Yang. Ling Xiao, I will give you a choice. Scram or die. I promised Xia Chen that I would help him take back the Killing God Palace. Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent, and there was not much surprise in his eyes. Given Qin Yang's temperament and means, 300 years was enough for him to turn the Killing God Palace into a sect that truly belonged to him. The reason why Ling Xiao spent so much effort to find Qi Luo and Yue was because he wanted to have a legitimate reason to kill Qin Yang and put the blame on the Realm Lord's palace. As for loyalty, it was just that they didn't have enough bargaining chips to betray him. As long as Qin Yang died, these experts of the Killing God Palace would eventually kneel at the feet of the victor. Ling Xiao, I heard that you have the reputation of being invincible in your generation. If you die in the hands of the God-killing palace's prime, I'm afraid the Ling people will not let this matter rest. Why don't we make a bet? Qin Yang smiled coldly. He wasn't afraid of Ling Xiao, but it didn't mean that he dared to kill Ling Xiao. Especially now that the Realm Lord was missing, the 7 palace masters were in seclusion, and even Snow Young Lord was enduring and keeping a low profile, he naturally didn't dare to touch the bottom line of the Ling people. What are we betting on? Ling Xiao stood in the void, surrounded by divine radiance, and had an extraordinary bearing. His smile was thought-provoking. This was indeed the trick of villains. They always liked to bet on battles. If a first-grade Saint Realm expert was a man of heaven's mandate, Ling Xiao would have to be careful. However, a villain without any destiny, what right did he have to be so arrogant in front of him? You and I will fight. If you lose, get lost. If I lose, I will give you the position of Killing God Palace Master. Qin Yang smiled domineeringly. As everyone knew, the difference between the Saint Realm and the Venerated Realm was like heaven's punishment. Those below the Saint Realm were all mortals. Even if Ling Xiao's battle prowess was heaven-defying and unparalleled, how could he contend against him? Moreover, the Shadow Soul Palace's methods had never been used in front of others. It was a supreme ability passed down from the Shadow Soul Palace Master. Even in the Saint Realm, it was difficult for anyone to block it. I don't care about the position of Killing God Palace Master. Today you must die. As soon as Ling Xiao finished speaking, he took a step forward. 7-colored mist suddenly gushed out from his body, forming a river of stars that fell straight towards Qin Yang. The sky collapsed and tens of thousands of Daos fell silent. Tens of thousands of Daos gathered into a palm, imprisoning heaven and earth and suppressing all life. Time, void, darkness, and flames appeared alternately. Vaguely, the crowd seemed to see an entire river of epics intertwined into billions of stars in the palm print. It was indescribably mysterious and vast. The scene was simply too shocking. At this moment, even the contempt in Qin Yang's eyes froze in an instant. He knew that Ling Xiao was very strong, but he didn't expect him to be so strong. The vast sea of stars falling from the sky was even more spectacular than the meteor shower he had seen with his sister before. Humph! A mere Venerated Realm expert wants to kill a Saint Realm expert. Qin Yang raised his head and looked at the palm print falling from the sky. A glint of battle intent gradually lingered in his eyes. For the past 300 years, he had been cultivating in seclusion in the Green Jade Mountain and had never fought with anyone of the same generation. Now it seemed that there were indeed many monsters in this chaotic world. Buzz! There was also tens of thousands of rays of light around Qin Yang. In his hand, a sparkling and translucent spirit saber appeared out of thin air. The sea of stars was multicolored and transformed into a divine sword that was tens of thousands of feet long. It was incomparably murderous and slashed at the spirit palm with the momentum of splitting open the sky. Heaven and earth were split apart. A thick and majestic saber aura swept across the sky and shattered countless stars. The sky was filled with splendor like fireworks in a flourishing age. It was shocking. At this moment, even the experts who had stepped into the Venerated Realm had a look of intense shock on their faces. It was too terrifying. The combat strength of these two monsters of the current generation was simply too terrifying. This kind of terrifying heavenly momentum that couldn't be stopped by tens of thousands of enemies was really similar to the grand occasion when the various races went on an expedition 100,000 years ago. Qin Yang stood in front of the hall calmly with a faint arrogance on his face. Even if Ling Xiao's immortal appearance was unparalleled, but he was still only in the Venerated Realm. As long as he slightly used a trace of the power of the sacred runes, all the attacks would be destroyed. Buzz! However, just as the saber aura was about to cut down the stars and destroy the spirit seal, a loud and clear sword hum was suddenly heard from the end of the sea of stars, intimidating the clouds, sharp for eternity. Chapter 1375. Qin Yang frowned and looked up into the sky. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly narrowed. He saw that in the sea of stars, 10 sword shadows were like torrents of sword chi. They carried a sword momentum that could annihilate everything as they descended from the sky. Buzz! The 10 swords wriggled and let out a deafening buzz. What was even more terrifying was that the 10 swords were surrounded by completely different rules of order. Thousands of strange phenomena alternated where the sword marks passed. There seemed to be a chaotic mist rising quietly in front of everyone's eyes. And in the mist, one could vaguely see many divine figures standing tall. Endless Tao sounds resounded for thousands of miles. It was like a sacrifice of gods and immortals, making people feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. After the 10 swords, Ling Xiao stepped forward. His black robe fluttered. His black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes seemed to be filled with the purest divinity. He was like a sword immortal descending from the 9 heavens. Wherever his gaze landed, the heavenly might would be vast. This is, Qingyang's expression turned serious again. He could feel that the 10 ancient swords in front of him had all reached the saint realm. Not to mention that these 10 swords were the best treasures in the world. Just the spiritual force of the swords alone was vast and terrifying. As expected of the young master of the Ling people, such a sword posture is enough to look down on his generation. But at this moment, Qingyang still didn't show much fear on his face. With Ling Zhao's strength, it wasn't that he couldn't kill saints, but at most, he could kill fake saints. But Qingyang was a peerless genius who had truly passed the saint tribulation and formed a saint pattern. Qingyang had the inheritance of the 7 sacred halls and Shadow Soul Hall. He had a background that could suppress an entire world. Why would he need to worry about a young master of the Ling people? Buzz! The world suddenly buzzed. Qingyang held the ancient sword horizontally in his hand. A surge of saint intent suddenly condensed, and the ancient sword in his hand shot out 100-foot-long spiritual light. The dazzling golden light pierced through the clouds and shattered the universe. It was like an ancient divine weapon that could split the world. In fact, just one look could make people's eyes hurt and their hearts tremble. A saint realm cultivator's flesh and blood spiritual energy had already shed their mortal aura and transformed into a saint will that was one with heaven and earth. It was clear that the saint realm pressure of this Shadow Soul Palace successor was far stronger than the sect elders from before. Boom! Qingyang slashed out with his saber, and the terrifying fluctuations of order turned into an unparalleled sharpness that collided with the 10 ancient swords. Suddenly, the void collapsed, and the vast power swept out in all directions. Countless cracks appeared on the entire Qingyao mountain at that moment. Clang clang! The 10 sacred swords came into contact with the blade one after another. Vaguely, the power of the blade that was supposed to slash through the heavens gradually calmed down. In the end, it turned into spiritual light that scattered across the horizon. As expected of the successor of Shadow Soul Palace, Ling Xiao smiled and stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. The 10 swords quietly hovered above his head, releasing an immortal sword intent. With Qingyang's means, it was probably very difficult for ordinary people of the current generation to go against him. The spiritual might contained in this simple slash was not something that an Exalt Realm cultivator could withstand. Moreover, judging from Qingyang's appearance, this divine power of the blade was probably not his trump card. Try taking another slash from me. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear as he raised one hand and swung it down. Wu Shuang, Dao's resentment. The 10 swords that had been stagnant burst out with dazzling divine light again. But this time, the 10 swords connected in the sky and condensed into a sword shadow that was 100 feet long. Runes surged on it, and countless ancient and mystical totems were engraved on it. Thousands of sword intents surrounded the sword, and it was filled with an indescribable sharpness. Multicolored light rose, and the sun and moon collapsed. If this slash was made, even the great path of time would be completely obliterated. This aura, at this moment, the expressions of countless exalted shrine cultivators had already changed. They looked at the sword shadow that was about to strike down with horror. Even with their strength, they felt a deep fear from the bottom of their hearts. Above the heavens, below the immortal gods, it was hard to imagine that this unparalleled and ancient slash was made by an exalt realm cultivator. Looks like Master Ling Xiao is planning to fight to the death with me today. Qin Yang's eyes were gloomy, and he still had some doubts in his heart. Although the Taigu Ling people and the World Lord Palace had always been at odds, this was only in the dark. After all, with the heritage of these two forces, it was impossible for them to completely destroy the other party. Therefore, in the past 100,000 years, whether it was the Ling people living in seclusion or the World Lord Palace not entering the God Battle domain, it was actually a compromise. At the very least, these two forces had reached a relatively stable situation on the surface. But today, Ling Zhao's actions had completely broken this balance. Could it be that the Taigu Ling people really wanted to seize the heavens? Or did this race believe that Ling Zhao's appearance was an opportunity for the Taigu Ling people to seize the world? Fight to the death. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled casually. But in the next moment, his eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. You think you're worthy? Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao didn't hesitate in the slightest. At the instant his palm pressed out, the 300 long sword image instantly emanated a brilliant golden radiance that seemed like a divine river that descended from the 9 heavens, and it formed into countless ancient and profound divine elephants. In the void thousands of miles away, Ling Zhao's figure stood tall. The sword bones around his body also released a 7-colored aura. Strands of multicolored light gradually enveloped his figure. He was like an ancient god who wanted to cleanse the world and punish evil. Slash! As his word fell, the sword's shadow instantly shattered the blue sea and slashed down from the sky. At this moment, the entire green jade mountain was silent. Then, everyone saw that under the sword edge, stars shattered, and yin and yang were in chaos. Even the supreme beings had a vague feeling that this sword was something they could not withstand. How ridiculous! How could a supreme being display a sword move that even they were afraid of? Ling Xiao, you forced me to do this. Qin Yang raised his head and looked at the sword's shadow that pierced through the void. Suddenly, a wisp of soul light rippled in his eyes. Countless divine soul runes appeared around his body. It was as if a supreme divine realm had transformed into its own universe and encompassed all the heavens. The Shadow Soul Palace, as its name implied. The true inheritance of this force was the divine soul Tao. With a thought, one's divine soul would not be destroyed, and one's physical body would become a shadow. However, Qin Yang was confident that with his realm, a supreme being would not be able to break his soul world. However, the moment the sword radiance fell, his face turned completely pale. Boom! The golden sword radiance illuminated the 9 heavens and slashed down horizontally. The 10,000 soul runes above Qin Yang's head dimmed almost instantly. Then, endless divine radiance shot up into the sky and blocked everyone's sight. In the end, Qin Yang's figure completely vanished before everyone's eyes the instant the sword shadow descended. The peak of Green Jade Mountain was silent. Everyone looked at the indifferent young man standing in the void. There was nothing but respect in their eyes. This chaotic world was mesmerizing. Chapter 1376. How terrifying! The young master of the Ling people's sword is comparable to the sword master of the Longyuan sword. I didn't expect the Ling people to have such a monstrous talent. Seems like Qing Tsang is going to change this time. There was an uproar in front of the godly slaying palace. Now, all the strong cultivators no longer cared about what happened between Xia Chen and Qin Yang 300 years ago. This was because the path to immortality had always been about the winner. Only those who survived had the right to judge the present and the past. When Xia Chen died, Qin Yang took the opportunity to take control of the godly slaying palace. Now, as long as Ling Xiao could kill Qin Yang, the position of the godly slaying palace master would change hands again. Buzz! However, while everyone was deep in thought, a loud buzzing sound suddenly came from the depths of the golden light. Immediately after, a hurricane of spiritual energy swept out and blew away the golden light that filled the sky. After that, everyone was dumbstruck when they saw 9 figures standing side by side on the square. They were actually 9 azure suns with the exact same aura and cultivation. Pucci. As for the person who was struck by the soaring firmament sword force, he directly shattered from the middle, turning into soul power and dissipating. Even so, the remaining 8 figures still stood in front of the palace with cold eyes. Now, everyone could see that there were soul runes above the 8 people's heads. They connected to form a world that covered an area of hundreds of feet. The divine runes on them revealed an undying and indestructible aura. This is Shadow Soul Palace's classic inheritance, the soul-suppressing world. Qi Luo's eyes trembled and fear flashed in the depths of her eyes. Back then, she, Xiachen, and Qin Yang were all peak emperor gods. In terms of combat power, Xiachen, who received the Slayer Emperor's inheritance, was undoubtedly stronger. But even then, Qin Yang still executed this supreme classic, and forcefully exhausted Xiachen to death. Even when the latter took out the soul-sucking ghost pearl, he still couldn't turn the situation around. In the end, he lost his reputation. The soul-suppressing world? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows, but his expression didn't change. When he fought with Qin Wupa in the Great Qin Empire, he was also trapped in the soul world. Clearly, regardless of whether it was Qin Wupa's Wului Ghost Realm or Qin Yang's Zhen Yuan Soul Realm, they both possessed the power of a world within a world. In other words, Qin Yang was equivalent to a god that controlled the world in the soul dimension, and he could crush all his enemies. However, unlike Qin Wupa's Wuming Ghost Realm, Qin Yang's Soul Realm seemed to be more mysterious. His body could split into 9 shadows, and their auras were identical to each other. Even if it was a Saint Realm cultivator, once they entered this realm, they would most likely perish. Shadow Soul Palace's Inheritance Classic. How does Palace Master Qin Yang know this divine palace's cultivation method? At this moment, an elder of the Massacre Divine Hall finally reacted and looked at Azure Sun in confusion. Although the identity of the Killing God Palace's Palace Master had no conflict with the successor of the Shadow Soul Palace. However, the prerequisite was that Qin Yang had to obtain the approval of the Killing God and fuse with the Killing God imprint that was related to his identity. Otherwise, if a descendant of the Shadow Soul Palace sat on the seat of the Killing Divine Palace Lord, what was the meaning of this faction's existence? Shadow Soul Palace's pawn? Vassal? Lackey? Inexplicably, many experts of the Massacre Divine Hall looked gloomy, and their eyes flickered with a hint of contemplation. Now, it seemed that Xia Chen's death was hiding many secrets. In the past 300 years, Qin Yang had indeed suppressed and expelled all the doubters of the Massacre Divine Hall. However, the sudden appearance of the young master of the Ling people had broken the doubts in everyone's hearts. As long as Ling Xiao could kill Qin Yang today, the Massacre Divine Hall might be able to break away from the control of the Shadow Soul Palace and regain its former glory. Moreover, Qin Yang had not truly fused with the Killing God imprint. How could he be worthy of being the palace master of the Massacre Divine Hall? Young master, be careful. This cultivation method is extremely terrifying. One soul can split into 9 shadows to kill the enemy. If you want to break the attack, you can only enter the soul dimension with your divine soul. However, Qi Luo's tone was solemn. In her opinion, this cultivation method was unsolvable. At least in the current generation, it was difficult for anyone to compete with Qin Yang in terms of divine soul. Enter the soul dimension? Ling Zhao's lips curled into an inexplicable smile. Compared to his spiritual power cultivation, his physical body and divine soul were truly terrifying. Especially after fusing with Gu Tian's soul power, his divine soul had entered the earthly sovereign level. Moreover, he had the void divine dagger, the absolute beginning divine talisman, and other supreme divine items in his soul sea. Who in the current generation could fight with him? Of course, Ling Xiao almost never revealed the foundation of his divine soul. After all, once people knew that his divine soul was so terrifying, they would definitely be on guard in the future. However, today, if he wanted to kill Qin Yang, he could only enter the soul dimension and fight with him. Ling Xiao, I will give you one last chance. If you retreat now, I can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to leave Mount Qinyao today. Qin Yang raised his head and looked at the black-robed figure above him. His eyes were calm as he spoke. Yes, Ling Xiao was very powerful and his sword principle was unparalleled. However, since he had used this trump card to expose his identity, even a Saint Realm expert would not be able to escape death, let alone a Venerable Realm expert. Is that so? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. His eyes were gentle. In the next moment, he took a step forward and landed on Qin Yang's head. Seeing this, Qin Yang was stunned. Then, his eyes became even more sinister and sarcastic. It seemed that the young master of the Ling people was very confident in his own strength. Even though Qi Luo had warned him earlier, it was obvious that Ling Xiao did not take it to heart. Ling Xiao, you've got guts, Qin Yang sneered. Suddenly, the 8 soul shadows rushed in 8 directions. In a short moment, an ancient divine soul dimension appeared in the void. It was as bright as a sea of stars and suppressed everything. Ling Xiao's silhouette fell directly into the upper realm and disappeared. Young master! Qi Luo's pretty face changed and her eyes trembled. Although, today, Ling Xiao had used his sword to kill the heavens and fought Qin Yang head-on. He had already proved his talent. However, no matter how many tricks he had up his sleeve, once he entered the dimension, it would be difficult for him to escape from Qin Yang's hands. Could it be that she had gambled wrongly today? Elder Yu, later, if Master Ling Xiao is unable to walk out of the soul dimension, I hope that you will take care of Xia Chen's descendant. As long as she can integrate with the God-killing mark, she still has a chance to take back the position of Temple Master. Qi Luo sighed softly and looked guiltily at Bai Ling, who was surrounded by the crowd. At this moment, she did not know that the real descendant of Xia Chen was the girl standing beside Bai Ling like a maid. Of course, what she did not know was that Ling Xiao had already planted a soul mark on Yue and made him a soul slave. Big brother will not lose. Before Yue could speak, Bai Ling suddenly shook her head and said with a determined look in her eyes. Qi Luo was stunned, but she saw Yue nod. Saintess Qi Luo, just wait patiently. The young master's means are not something that ordinary people can predict. Now that he was Ling Xiao's soul slave, he naturally saw the terrifying divine soul of the Ling people's young master. More importantly, Yue did not think that Ling Xiao was an arrogant person. Since he dared to enter the soul dimension, he must have enough confidence to kill Qin Yang. Chapter 1377. But Qi Luo wanted to say something but hesitated. Her gaze was extremely complicated. She knew Qin Yang's methods better than anyone else. Once Ling Xiao was defeated, it would be too late for them to leave. There are no buts. I've already said that Big Brother will not be defeated. Bai Ling glanced at Qi Luo coldly. She did not have any conflict with this woman's past. She merely did not like people who doubted Ling Xiao. Whether it was the past or the future, all of the regrets and expectations, they were all false. Only Big Brother was fate, reincarnation, the end of karma, the end of time. He would not let her down. If he were to be defeated, who would be worth waiting for in the future? Sigh. In the end, Qi Luo sighed softly and did not say anything else. At that moment, she had already made up her mind. No matter what happened later, she would protect Xia Chen's bloodline. 300 years of regret had already exhausted her both physically and mentally. To her, life and death were simply not worth mentioning. The reason why the godly slaughtering imprint was in her possession was actually a backup plan that Qi Luo had prepared for herself. With her understanding of Qin Yang, she had long guessed that he would definitely make a move against her after killing Xia Chen. Thus, she had already tricked Xia Chen into giving her the godly slaughtering imprint before she had even mounted a sneak attack on him. Because of that, the regret in Qi Luo's heart was like a maggot attached to her bones, tormenting her non-stop for the past 300 years. Qi Luo still remembered that day when she had personally asked Xia Chen who was more important, her or the godly slaughtering palace's palace master. Without any hesitation, Xia Chen handed the imprint that represented the godly slaughtering imprint to her. However, in the end, Qi Luo still chose her sect and betrayed Xia Chen. Originally, she had only felt pain and hated Qin Yang bitterly. She did not feel that she had done anything wrong. After all, Xia Chen's death had saved thousands of lives in her sect. She had no other choice. However, it would appear that she had still underestimated her feelings for Xia Chen. It had been 300 years. Qi Luo had been in pain all the time. If she had trusted Xia Chen more back then, like how this young woman before her had trusted Ling Xiao, would she have had another choice? He would not be defeated. What sort of deep feelings and obsession did those words contain? Great love. There was nothing to say. Only to trust him. Buzz. At this moment, in the Zhen Yuan soul world, Ling Xiao looked at the world in front of him in surprise. This place was no longer the peak of Qingyao Mountain, but a desolate and ancient mystical space. Qingyang stood tall in the sky with an arrogant look on his face. The aura surging around his body had reached the 8th grade saint realm. Clearly, this was where the mysteries of the Shadow Soul Palace lay. If he did not enter the soul world, he would have to split his soul into 9 bodies to fight against the enemy at the same time. And once they entered the soul world, the cultivation of the person who set up the soul world would be the fusion of the 9 incarnations. Ling Xiao had killed one of Qin Yang's incarnations with a swing of his sword. Therefore, he was now at the 8th grade saint realm. Otherwise, he would be at peak rank 9 now. Ling Xiao, Qi Luo should have told you my identity, right? Qingyang's figure descended from the sky as he looked coldly at the youth before him. In the end, there was no deep hatred between him and Ling Xiao. All the conflicts were caused by Xia Chen. Just like Ling Xiao, Qingyang always believed that there was nothing in this world that could not be betrayed. The successor of the Shadow Soul Palace? Ling Xiao nodded and chuckled. He casually glanced at the soul world in front of him. At this moment, he could feel that this space had completely blocked out the fluctuation of spiritual power. Even his physical and blood strength seemed to be completely imprisoned by a strange force. In other words, he could only rely on the strength of his spirit to fight here. Master Ling Xiao, there is no deep hatred between us. Why do you have to fight to the death? Although I admire your righteousness, sometimes it will hurt you. Qingyang smiled sinisterly. He did not hide the threat in his voice at all. In the Zhen Yuan soul world, not to mention a youth of the venerable realm, he even dared to fight a supreme expert. However, killing Ling Xiao would only bring harm to Qingyang. Ling people's tyranny would even cause his end to be extremely miserable. If the two of them could each take a step back, today's farce would also be completely over. One Qi Luo, the other Yue, dared to be so presumptuous in the Green Jade Mountain. They were simply courting death. Since the god-killing imprint had appeared and Qi Luo was the first to break the Tao Heart Oath, then there was nothing to worry about. Not only would Qi Luo die, but the entire Jade Lake sacred ground would also pay the price for her betrayal. Oh, what do you want to say? Ling Xiao nodded indifferently and finally looked at Qingyang. At this moment, he completely understood the power of the soul world. Thus, a Qingyang without any luck could not make any waves at all. Everyone knows that the Lord Ling Xiao is righteous and unique in the world. But if you lose today, no one will believe that. Xia Chen is innocent and you will be the one who protected the evil spirit. Your reputation will be ruined. Qingyang's face was full of regret, but Ling Xiao suddenly smiled brightly and said, "Palace Master Qingyang, you worry too much. I have never cared about how the world sees me. Moreover, I will not lose." "You will not lose?" Qingyang was so angry that he laughed. His saint aura suppressed the world. Countless soul runes appeared around him, outlining a picture of mountains and rivers and a map of the stars in the sky. "If you won't lose, then I will lose?" "Palace Master Qingyang, I have a question. Why did the Realm Lord's 7 palaces suddenly go into hiding? The Tao Protector behind you should be on the Green Jade Mountain, right?" Ling Xiao did not show a trace of fear in the face of Qingyang's divine soul suppression. Instead, he smiled playfully. Qingyang frowned slightly when he saw this, and a wisp of uneasiness suddenly arose in his heart. However, this soul-suppressing world was the classic inheritance of the Shadow Soul Palace. It was also the true top cultivation technique of the Azure world. In this soul world, all spiritual energy fluctuations and bloodline power would be completely confined. Even if Ling Xiao had some life-saving trump cards given to him by the Ling people, he would not be able to use them at all. Then, what was he laughing about? Ling Xiao, you are still trying to be mysterious when you are about to die. Well, since you are so stubborn, I will crush you here today and send you back to the Ling people. Qingyang snorted. The moment he stepped out, the sea of stars above his head suddenly fell. Suddenly, the entire soul world changed, and the momentum was surging. Thousands of stars fell from the sky like a meteor sea of fire, and Ling Xiao's figure was enveloped in a breath. However, the moment a smile appeared on Qingyang's face, his eyes suddenly flashed with a strong sense of disbelief. At this moment, he seemed to feel that at the place where the stars fell, a vast and unparalleled Supreme Being aura suddenly surged. This kind of fluctuation was so terrifying that the entire soul world emitted bursts of ear-piercing buzzing. After that, Qingyang was dumbstruck as he saw a slightly slender figure slowly walk out from the sea of fire. His body was circulating with a supreme aura, and every move seemed to contain the heavenly Tao, causing the void to boil. How is this possible? This aura, a Supreme Being spirit. A young man with a Supreme Being cultivation level actually had a Supreme Being spirit. Preposterous, laughable, simply King unreasonable. Chapter 1378. Since Hall Master Qingyang doesn't want to tell me, I'll have to see for myself. Ling Xiao took a step forward and appeared above Qingyang's head with a surge of soul power. A terrifying aura was restored, and a soul seal appeared in Ling Xiao's hand. The void was imprisoned, and all Daos were obliterated. Only the black-robed figure was immortal and immortal. Villains didn't need to turn the tables around. Strength was the way to go. At this moment, Qingyang's face was pale. He didn't expect the young master of the Ling people to have hidden his strength so well. Venerable realm cultivation and a paragon divine soul? Even the successor of the Ghost Clan couldn't do that. Of course, what terrified Qingyang was the young man's temperament. Everyone knew that the young master of the Ling people's sword Tao was unparalleled. However, what was truly terrifying about him was not the sword Tao that was praised by others. Damn it! Such a monstrous genius was comparable to the sages of the human race who created the world in the desolate epoch. How could he be born in this era where spirit chi was scarce? Buzz! The soul seal fell like thousands of stars exploding at the same time. Just the surging soul might alone was enough to easily pierce through the void and shatter it. Qingyang's expression was ferocious, and his soul power spread out. In the depths of the soul world, several auras quietly dissipated. The world was clear, and the peak of Qinyao Mountain came into view again. It was obvious that Qin Yang didn't dare to be entangled with Ling Xiao. He chose to withdraw the soul world and escape immediately. But, the moment the soul world dissipated, the soul seal finally fell on top of Qin Yang's head. At this moment, the Shadow Soul Hall's successor's eyes suddenly widened. He helplessly crushed an ancient soul jade in his hand. Spirit light blossomed around his body, condensing into a divine shadow above his head that exuded an ancient majesty. But, even so, the moment the soul imprint landed, countless cracks appeared on the divine shadow. Qin Yang finally couldn't suppress the despair in his eyes. He looked up to the sky and roared, "Elder Zhu, save me!" Boom! Suddenly, dark clouds gathered at the back of Qinyao Mountain. Divine power soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the originally clear sky darkened. A vast Supreme Being aura swept across the mountains and rivers, and the expressions of all the experts of the Killing Shrine changed drastically. Even Yu Yi and the rest had fear in their eyes. Clearly, they were intimidated by this aura. Boom! However, no matter how terrifying this might was, it was unable to stop the divine seal above Qin Yang's head in time. With a loud bang, the divine shadow outside Qin Yang's body shattered instantly. His entire body was crushed to the ground by the divine seal, and he completely disappeared without a trace. The entire Green Jade Mountain was dead silent. Everyone looked at the figure of the young man standing in the clouds with an indifferent gaze. Their lips trembled, but they did not know what to say. Invincible immortal beauty and crushing a generation seemed to be insufficient to describe the strength of this young master of the Ling people. Although many people did not see clearly how Qingyang was suppressed by the seal, Qingyang's strength was still very strong. However, the outcome was already in front of them. The dignified master of the Killing Shrine, the prodigy of the Shadow Soul Hall, and a peerless first-level Saint Realm expert, had been defeated. In fact, from the beginning to the end, Ling Xiao had always been calm and collected. One sword to split the sky, and one seal to kill the enemy. It was too terrifying. This young man was simply a god of war. Any living being that dared to challenge his dignity would not be able to escape destruction in the end. This was especially true for Qi Luo, whose eyes were filled with a trace of ridicule. No one knew better than her about Qin Yang's method. However, he had still been defeated. Utterly defeated. Cough cough, Elder Zhu. Save, amidst the smoke and dust, a violent coughing sound was suddenly heard. A figure crawled out from the ground with difficulty. All the bones in his body were broken, and even the armor on his body was covered in countless cracks. At this moment, Qin Yang's vitality was waning, and he was in an extremely sorry state. However, the moment he finished speaking, a figure descended from the sky and stomped his head to the ground. "Junior, how dare you!" At the end of the world, a cold and angry roar suddenly came. An indescribably terrifying momentum suddenly fell, like a long cloud covering the sun, and instantly crushed the entire Green Jade Mountain. However, at this moment, Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a strange soul light. He suddenly exerted force and directly crushed Qin Yang's head. Buzz! At the same time, the latter's soul was directly shrouded by an invisible soul power and torn to pieces. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly, but he was a little surprised. At this moment, he could see a lot of information about the Shadow Soul Hall and the Realm Master in Qin Yang's Soul Sea. However, even he, the successor of the Shadow Soul Hall, did not know that the Realm Master had disappeared. However, according to the Shadow Soul Hall Master's guess, the Realm Master seemed to have gone to an extremely mysterious place, and that place seemed to contain a supreme item that could shock the 9 heavens. Qin Yang. A figure suddenly appeared in the void thousands of miles away, and then directly pierced through the sea and appeared in front of Ling Xiao. He stretched out one hand, and like a mountain and sea, it suppressed all things, and there was no way to break free. This scene instantly caused the faces of Yu Yi and the others to change drastically. Only Ling Zhao's eyes were calm and unperturbed. From Qin Yang's memory, he already knew that this powerhouse in front of him was called Zhu Jie, the second elder of the Shadow Soul Hall, and also his guardian. A fifth-grade Sky Supreme, the true powerhouse standing at the peak of Qingcang. In the past 300 years, it was because of Zhu Jie's deterrence that Qin Yang logically took control of the Killing God Palace and eliminated many of his opponents. Usually, Zhu Jie had been cultivating in seclusion at the back of the Green Jade Mountain and would not easily appear. Moreover, the 300 years had already made the two of them let down their guard. Just now, when Ling Xiao appeared, there were no powerhouses of the Ling people following him. Therefore, Qin Yang did not dare to awaken this guardian at the first moment. Perhaps, in his eyes, a person of the venerable realm was not a concern at all. Didn't villains always die of carelessness? Brat! You deserve to die. Zhu Jie's expression was sorrowful and indignant, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. At this moment, although he did not know Ling Zhao's identity, anyone who dared to kill the successor of the Shadow Soul Hall would not be able to escape death today, no matter who it was. How dare you touch the successor of the Ling people? Old thing, you deserve to die. However, the moment the huge palm came down from the sky, a cold shout came from the end of the world. Suddenly, the void trembled and all the chaos disappeared. Everything in the world seemed to have suddenly stopped. Then, everyone saw a pair of black and dazzling wings, shaking the blue sky and defying the heavens. The moment the wings flapped, the world instantly turned dark. The palm that Zhu Jie had thrown out disappeared into thin air, and there was no trace of it. How is this possible? Everyone's faces froze again. At this moment, there was a strong sense of horror in Zhu Jie's eyes. The successor of the Ling people? Chapter 1379. Boom! A loud noise came from the mountain behind Qinyao Mountain. Everyone watched in horror as the spirit palm that had disappeared appeared out of thin air thousands of miles away. It crashed down and flattened a mountain peak. Hiss, what kind of technique is this? Reversing the universe? Emperor Realm. Countless exclamations suddenly rang out. Even Zhu Jie swallowed hard at this moment. With his strength, he was one of the top existences in Qingcang. Although he had not used his full strength, even a heavenly sovereign would not be able to block it easily. Not to mention that he had used such a strange technique to move it 1,000 miles away. Zhu Jie felt a chill in his heart. He felt that his life was coming to an end today. He lifted his head and looked at the place where the black light was spreading. He saw a graceful figure descending from the sky. At this moment, heaven and earth were overturned, and the boundless killing intent began to revive. Among the crowd, Pang Yun, the great elder of the godly slaying temple, suddenly changed his expression. Spiritual light flickered around him as he tried to escape. Qingyang was dead. It seemed that the mysterious person who had suddenly appeared was the real powerhouse of the Ling people. As Qingyang's lackey, he would not be able to escape death today. He might still have a chance to survive if he escaped in the chaos. When this person killed Zhu Jie, he would not have a chance to survive. Buzz. However, the instant Pang Yun's figure moved, the wind and clouds in the surrounding 10,000 miles changed again. As for the figure that was originally walking in the air, it had strangely disappeared on the spot. Pang Yun's face suddenly turned pale, and a chill rose in his heart. At this moment, he seemed to see the space in front of him twisting strangely. A fair and slender hand pierced through the sky and pressed down gently. No, even though Pang Yun had the cultivation of a second-grade heavenly sovereign, he still felt a chill run down his spine. Divine radiance surged on his palm as he faced the jade-like hand. Puff! However, the moment their palms touched, Pang Yun's eyes widened. His entire arm shattered, and half of his body was torn apart by a terrifying and strange force. He could not resist it. He could not even fight back. Boom! Boom! Blood splattered everywhere, and the sky darkened. The rain of blood, which contained the supreme aura, suppressed the Taoist rhymes of the entire world. However, before Pang Yun could react, the white hand extended once again and lightly pressed against the top of his head. Poochie! This time, Pang Yun didn't even have the chance to resist. His head was instantly crushed by the jade-like hand. The divine blood fell, crushing the ancient mountain and turning the space within 10,000 miles into fine powder. All of the elders and disciples of the killing divine palace retreated in horror. However, there were still some unlucky ones who were covered by the divine blood's power and had their bodies and souls destroyed. The sky was dark and the sun was dim. And in the darkness, a figure gradually appeared. It was an exquisite and graceful woman dressed in black. She had a charming and seductive face and a graceful bearing. There was a faint chill on her face, like the coldest frost in the 9 heavens. Even so, her beauty was still soul-stirring and made people yearn for her. Strands of 7-colored mist spread out from his body, devouring the light and containing a supreme power that could suppress the mountains and seas. Who are you? Zhu Jie's lips trembled and his voice was full of fear. The Ling people had a deep foundation and countless powerhouses. This was common knowledge in Qingtsang. However, this race had always been hidden from the world and rarely appeared. Ling Yuanqing alone was enough to frighten thousands of races. However, the woman before him was obviously more powerful than Ling Yuanqing. You dare to attack the young master of the Ling people as a supreme? Old man, you deserve to die. The mystic butterfly stood in the sky and looked down at Ling Xiao with concern in her eyes. Ever since Ling Xiao sent her a message to come here, the mystic butterfly didn't stop for a second. She directly tore through the void from the realm of divinity and rushed to the northwest. Even so, if she came a second later, Ling Xiao would have been suppressed. With the mystic butterfly's temperament, she rarely showed such anger. However, in her eyes, not to mention being suppressed, even if Ling Xiao was slightly injured, it would be an unforgivable crime. I didn't know he was the young master of the Ling people. At this moment, Zhu Jie was already panicking. Logically speaking, the Realm Lord Hall controlled the world and should be above all living beings. However, the Ling people were different. This ancient race was a power that even the Realm Lord was afraid of. How could he, the second elder of the Shadow Soul Hall, fight against them? Even though the woman's aura was only at the 9 heavens supreme level, her means and battle prowess were extremely terrifying. Although Pang Yun's cultivation was only at the 2nd stage of the Sky Supreme level, Zhu Jie would have to use all his strength to kill him. However, just now, this woman had killed a Sky Supreme with just 2 palms. Ridiculous! Were the Taigu Ling people really that terrifying? From the ancestor to the young master, they were all so monstrous that they were invincible in the same realm and could even kill opponents of a higher realm? Your ignorance is not a crutch for you to beg for forgiveness. When the young master of the Ling clan entered the world, the Ling clan has never interfered in the fights between peers. However, if someone takes advantage of their seniority, there will only be one outcome. Mi Dai's voice was cold and contained an unquestionable authority. It was as if the elder of the Shadow Soul Hall, who was at the 5th stage of the Sky Supreme level, was just an ant that she could kill with a wave of her hand. No, it's him. He killed the successor of the Shadow Soul Hall. The Ling people are provoking us. Do you really want to declare war on the Realm Lord Hall? Zhu Jie's face was filled with grief and indignation. He wanted to escape, but he did not dare to act rashly. The techniques that Mi Dai had displayed just now were too intimidating. Especially the control of the void, it was not something that ordinary supreme beings could contend against. At the very least, Zhu Jie did not think that he could escape from the hands of the Ling people's supreme being. You're courting death. Ancestor Mi Dai. However, just as Mi Dai's eyes were cold and she was about to attack, she suddenly heard Ling Xiao call out softly. Young master. The coldness on Mi Dai's face dissipated almost instantly. Her eyes were filled with indescribable tenderness as she looked at Ling Xiao. Even Ling Xiao felt a chill run down his body. It was as if there was a mountain torrent with nowhere to go. Once there was a crack, it would definitely flood. Senior, you just said that I killed Qin Yang to declare war on the Shadow Soul Hall? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. His eyes were gentle, and he looked like a different person from when he killed Qin Yang. Is that not the case? Zhu Jie snorted coldly and suppressed the fear in his heart. Ling Xiao's actions today were undoubtedly a slap to the face of the Realm Lord Hall. Even if he died here today, in the future, the 7 sacred halls would avenge him and Qin Yang. Haha, it turns out that I was too foolish and naive. I trusted the so-called light and justice in this world too much. Ling Xiao let out a long sigh. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and the bitterness on his face made the hearts of the surrounding experts from the Killing Divine Hall sink. Chapter 1380. What do you mean by Mua? At this moment, Zhu Jie's old face had already turned blank. Why did this Ling people's young master look like? He killed Qin Yang because Qin Yang deserved to die and the Shadow Soul Hall was guilty of the most heinous crimes. Everyone says that the Realm Lord Hall controls the Azure Sky continent and suppresses evil. That's why the human race prospered and recovered its former prosperity. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the sky. His gaze was especially cold. I was fortunate enough to see the Realm Lord Hall's young master, Xuexian. We fought the Sky Demon together and severely injured it. The young master is not afraid of death. The image of him fighting the demon often appears in my mind, urging me not to forget the shame of the human race and to seek justice for the common people. Hearing this, a wisp of solemn reverence appeared on the faces of everyone present. The Sky Demon was the source of evil in the 9 heavens. Immortals and gods did not dare to mention its true name. Xuexian and Ling Xiao fought together back then. They were unparalleled, loyal and righteous. They were role models of the righteous path. It was also because of this that their young master's righteousness was known throughout the Azure Sky continent. These two were outstanding talents of the current generation and had the opportunity to control the world. However, what was Lord Ling Xiao's intention in talking about this? But I really didn't expect that the Realm Lord Hall, which is known to slay demons and suppress evil, would hide such a filthy person. A look of resentment suddenly appeared on Ling Xiao's face. He raised his head and looked at Zhu Jie without fear. What do you mean? What do I mean? Senior, don't you know? Ling Xiao snorted coldly, not hiding the killing intent in his eyes. With the mystic butterfly here, Zhu Jie would definitely die today. However, it was easy to kill him. To kill him until he was convinced and respected by the world, some small tricks were needed. Now that the Ling people had appeared and fought for the power of heaven and earth, all races were afraid and did not dare to say anything. If the Ling people were too domineering now, it would only intensify the conflict. What's more, there was no lack of people in this world who would fan the flames of trouble. Once those ancient clans with ulterior motives took advantage of this opportunity to add fuel to the fire, the Ling people would fall into a passive situation. The meaning of boiling a frog in warm water was to achieve one's wish unknowingly. It wasn't impossible to conquer a world, but it wasn't the best plan. With the disappearance of the Realm Lord, no one knew what other trump cards he had in his hands. As for the celestial race, they stood tall in the 9 heavens and dominated the ancient times. They were even more unfathomable. This path to immortality had never been smooth sailing. Even though Ling Xiao was unparalleled and had the help of the system, he still had to be careful and advance step by step. After all, which one of those experts that had truly lived for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years weren't clever and scheming? In a game of chess with them, a single careless move could lead to total annihilation. As the name implied, the World Lord Hall would be elevated to the peak of righteousness. If that was the case, Qingyang and Zhu Jie's actions would truly be heinous beyond redemption. At that time, Shadow Soul Palace would be doubted by the world, and Ling Shao would still be the righteous light that didn't fear authority. In fact, with the World Lord Hall's current situation, they could only swallow their resentment and distance themselves from Qingyang and Zhu Jie. They could only push all the blame onto two dead people to maintain their supreme reputation. Of course, the Taigu Ling people and the World Lord Hall had always been on opposite sides. There was an irreconcilable conflict. Therefore, Ling Shao didn't have to worry that his actions would attract the hostility of the World Lord Hall. What he wanted to do was to make this Azure Sky Overlord the enemy of the entire world before the Realm Lord reappeared. No matter what he was scheming, he would truly fall into a passive position. And this was the key to victory in a chess game. How many of those who truly stood at the peak of the world and controlled the world did it in one go? Didn't they all walk out of the Blood Sea conspiracy step by step? In the end, they saw through the darkness of this world, turned into darkness, swept away all obstacles, and redefined the light. How could it be easy to go against the heavens and kill the celestial race? I don't know what you're talking about. Zhu Jie clenched his teeth, his expression already somewhat panicked. In the past 300 years, what Qin Yang did couldn't be considered honorable. Moreover, Ling Shao had already shown enough respect and reverence to the World Lord Hall just now. Once he used this reason to kill Qin Yang, it would be logical. He would be getting rid of evil for the people. It's fine if you don't know. Let me remind you. Ling Shao smiled eerily and turned to look at Qi Luo. Now that the Jade Lake Saintess had given the godly killing imprint to Bai Ling, she had completely lost her value. And the memories of her divine soul were the evidence to condemn Qin Yang and Zhu Jie. Seeing the deep meaning in Ling Zhao's eyes, Qi Luo took a deep breath and walked to the front of the crowd. From the beginning, Qi Luo knew that she wouldn't be able to live today. No matter what difficulties she had in the past, in the end, she had betrayed Xiachen. This was an indisputable fact. Now, it seemed that Lord Ling Shao was loyal and brave. He would definitely not let those evil people go. And she, Qi Luo, could only atone for her sins with her death. However, right now, Qi Luo didn't panic or fear at all. 300 years ago, her Tao heart had been completely shattered. Now that she had seen Ling Zhao's righteousness, she naturally believed that he would keep his promise and protect the Jade Lake sacred ground. In this way, her death wouldn't be meaningless. Qin Yang is evil and unforgivable. Today, Qi Luo is willing to die to expose all his crimes. Young master, please fulfill my wish. Qi Luo took a deep breath. Her eyes were filled with determination. Ling Shao frowned and looked at her. He said in a low voice, "Have you thought it through?" "Yes. If my death can be exchanged for the world's clarity, Qi Luo will not regret it." With that, Qi Luo suddenly raised her hand and slammed it on the top of her head. Instantly, a wisp of divine soul appeared in the air. Like a fleeting view of flowers, Qi Luo's short life was exposed to everyone. Especially how Qin Yang coveted the god of slaughter's inheritance, how he schemed against Xiachen, and how he used the Jade Lake sacred ground to threaten Qi Luo. It turned out that everyone had misunderstood Xiachen and was deceived by a villain, wasting 300 years. Shadow Soul Palace is truly despicable. Ling Zhao's voice was cold and seemed to be filled with great pain. He closed his eyes in despair. His figure was bleak, and even his body was faintly trembling. Seeing this, the god of slaughter's experts felt a sense of reverence in their hearts. This was the true light of the human race. Comparing the two, the World Lord's palace was truly evil. Qin Qin Yang's actions have nothing to do with me or Shadow Soul Palace. I am only his Tao protector. Zhu Jie's lips trembled. At this point, all explanations seemed weak and powerless. I promised Xia Chen that I would seek justice for him. Now that I have found his daughter, the god of slaughter's imprint should be controlled by her. Before Zhu Jie could finish his sentence, Ling Xiao suddenly shouted coldly and looked up into the sky. Brother Xia, do you see that? Qin Yang and Qi Luo are both dead. I have avenged you. Chapter 1381. Our young master is so righteous. The peak of Mount Qinyao was silent. After that, a series of shouts suddenly broke through the clouds, rising and falling one after another. Originally, everyone thought that Ling Xiao could use the opportunity to merge with the Killing God Seal and control the Killing Shrine after killing Qin Yang and Qi Luo. However, based on what he said just now, it seemed like he had given the opportunity to Xia Chen's daughter. Everything he did was to fulfill a promise. Inexplicably, the eyes of the disciples of the Killing Shrine trembled. There was nothing but respect in their hearts. The path to immortality was dangerous, and people's hearts were unpredictable. It was a blessing to have met their young master. Otherwise, how could Qi Luo be willing to die? Moreover, when their young master found Qi Luo, he was full of passion and selflessness. Senior. Ling Xiao sighed softly. His face had already regained its calm. Now you can die. What? I said. I have nothing to do with this. I am only Qin Yang's guardian. Now that he is dead. Zhu Jie swallowed hard. His face had already turned pale. However, at this moment, Bewitching Butterfly suddenly took a step forward and walked slowly toward him. Instantly, the sky darkened and a thick fog rose. Vaguely, there seemed to be a pair of black wings unfurling, covering 1,000 miles and confining the entire space. You deserve to die. You attacked the young master of the Ling people as a supreme being. This crime is unforgivable. Bewitching Butterfly snorted coldly and stretched out her hand. Countless demonic runes surged on it, covering the sky. Behind her, the pair of black wings flapped gently. Thousands of wind traces lingered in the sky like shackles, breaking the void and trapping Zhu Jie on the spot. The power of heaven and earth changed in an instant. Even though Zhu Jie was a 5th-grade sky supreme being, he felt an extreme killing intent shrouding him. He could not break free at all. This kind of power was too eerie, and it made him feel hopeless. No. You can't kill me. At this critical moment, Zhu Jie roared angrily. Tao runes appeared around him, and divine light filled the sky. There seemed to be thousands of divine shadows in his eyes. Real dragons, divine phoenixes, rivers, seas, and ancient mountains, and his domineering aura covered thousands of miles. Furthermore, at this time, in the northwest of the Azure continent, countless cultivators had already awakened from the ancient tombs. They raised their heads and looked in the direction of the Azure Jade Mountain, their eyes filled with fear. Only to see that the blue dome of heaven was dim, the great sun without light. Boundless void ripples swept out like waves, on the verge of destruction. Sky Supreme. It had been a long time since Qin Tsang had fought with a heavenly supreme in the past 100,000 years. Other than the patriarch of the Foliaceae, who was killed, no one else died. However, judging from the aura in that area, it was likely that another heavenly sovereign would die today. Boom boom! Outside Zhu Jie's body, divine might fluctuated and strange phenomena appeared one after another. Billions of rays of light bloomed in the sky, trying to break free from the shackles of the wind mark. But it was useless. As the bewitching butterfly palm descended, it was as if a sea of stars had descended. It carried with it the power to destroy the universe and lightly imprinted itself on Zhu Jie's chest. Pucci! In the blink of an eye, everything was destroyed. The power of the godly phenomenon completely vanished. Zhu Jie lowered his head in a daze and looked at the palm that had pierced through his chest. His lips trembled slightly, but he could not make any sound for a long time. Immediately after, the demonic runes in the bewitching butterfly eyes flickered. Zhu Jie felt a torrential force explode in his body, destroying his physical body and divine soul. Boom! A rain of blood fell. The rain that contained the divine might of a heavenly supreme annihilated the entire green jade mountain. Smoke and dust rose into the sky, covering the entire area. Only the graceful figure in black stood tall in the sky, intimidating all living beings. Gulp! All the Killing Shrine's experts turned pale. They felt an endless chill rising from the soles of their feet. Although they were both heavenly sovereigns, Bewitching Butterfly's cultivation level was 3 grades higher than Zhu Jie's. However, in terms of combat power, the two of them were obviously not on the same level. It should be known that the reason why the various factions in the Azure Sky did not dare to rashly start an immortal battle was because once heavenly sovereigns fought, it would be difficult to determine the victor in a short time. However, this notion was completely overturned by the sovereign of the Ling people today. Everyone. Ling Xiao only turned to look at the group of Killing Shrine's experts when the dark clouds in the sky dispersed and the sun shone down. Although this faction was riddled with holes and countless experts had died, the Killing Shrine's Killing Shrine had never been a Killing Shrine. The purpose of the Killing Shrine's existence was never to fight openly. It was to control chess pieces and information in the dark. I once promised Xia Chen that I would protect his bloodline. Now that the traitor is dead, the position of the Killing Shrine's master shall be returned to this lady. Do you have any objections? Ling Zhao's eyes were clear. Although his tone was gentle, who dared to refute the domineering aura in his voice? Of course, Xia Zhiming and Yu Yi had already been reduced to Ling Xiao and by Ling's soul slaves now, so they didn't dare have the slightest intention to resist. No. No objections. What a joke. Given Ling Zhao's strength, if he wanted to avenge Xia Chen, all the Killing Shrine's experts present were at fault. Today, the young master had shown them mercy, which was already the greatest favor. As for the position of the Killing Shrine's master, coveting it now was no different from courting death. That's good. I will stay in the Green Jade Mountain for a few days. Elder Yu Yi, I'll leave Ling and Ji Meng to you in the future. With that, Ling Xiao waved at Bai Ling and headed deep into the mountain in the distance. Mystic Butterfly, on the other hand, pursed her lips and revealed an embarrassed expression. She no longer had the supreme killing posture from before. Brother! In the Green Jade Mountain, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the sky in the distance. Now that the Killing Shrine had fallen into his hands, this trip could be considered complete. Next, he only needed to go to the burial region and find the group of bandits who had killed the Su family's young master, Su Shan, and retrieve the Su family's lost treasures. Then, he could patiently wait for the Death Spirit region to open. As long as Su Yen could enter the Sky Saint Business Alliance, this wealth that had been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years would not be able to escape Ling Zhao's control. Moreover, Ling Xiao already knew from Hua Mingxi that the only way to open the Heaven and Earth Palace was in the hands of her eldest senior sister. By then, Hua Mingxi would have exhausted all her energy. Ling Xiao should also send her to see Lei Yan and take a look at who their eldest senior sister was at the same time. Integrate the Killing God mark first. Ling Xiao waved his hand, and the two figures immediately appeared in the realm. Bai Ling nodded slightly and sat cross-legged on the spot, holding the pitch-black mark in her hand. According to Ling Zhao's speculation, when Xia Chen obtained the Killing Emperor's inheritance and rebuilt the Killing Shrine, it was definitely not just because of the Killing Emperor's reputation. This mark more or less contained some means to restrain the experts of the Killing Shrine. As long as Bai Ling integrated it, it would be difficult for this force to betray her. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the figure sitting cross-legged on the sword tower. The corners of his mouth gradually curled into an inexplicable smile. This trip to the northwest of Qing-tsang could be said to be a fruitful one. Not only did he make the Buddhist sect the scapegoat of hiding demons, but he also successfully captured Yaoguang's Taoist heart and controlled an ancient force. However, the sudden appearance of the Shadow Soul Palace more or less made Ling Xiao feel a sense of crisis. After all, no one knew what identities the successors of the 6 palaces were hiding in the sea of people. However, the combat power of the Sky Demon Palace's old subordinates, Mystic Butterfly, did not disappoint him. Although they were all heavenly sovereigns in this realm, these demon Tao experts could be said to be killing indiscriminately. Chapter 1382. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Bai Ling sat cross-legged in front of the heavenly palace. The gate of heaven above her head shone with a mysterious light, revealing endless mysteries. The dark and deep gate of heaven seemed to have the aura of samsara flowing in it. One could not help but want to break the barrier and explore the mystery deep inside. At a certain moment, Bai Ling suddenly opened her eyes. Endless fog quietly rose from her body. An indescribable and terrifying murderous intent surged, causing the sound of Tao to ring. It was piercingly cold. A purple vertical mark flashed in between her eyebrows. It was difficult to conceal the secret of heaven. Meanwhile, her luck rose to 18,000 at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ling Zhao's eyes trembled slightly. The smile on his face grew wider. It seemed that Bai Ling's identity was closely related to the master of samsara. Moreover, compared to the scene Ling Xiao saw in the 1,000-weapon Taoist scripture, the aura of samsara around this girl was 10,000 times stronger. However, as for who exactly she was, it was likely that he would only know after the gate of immortality was completely opened. Brother! Bai Ling showed a rare smile on her face. Ling Xiao chuckled and reached out to stroke her little head. Ling-er, how is it? Brother, there is a strand of slaughter origin in the mark of killing God. It is far more terrifying than the power of Tao. It also contains the Slayer's supreme superpower. Bai Ling thought. The purple divine mark immediately shone with a mysterious light and an extreme murderous intent. Not bad. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. He was not very interested in the Slayer's inheritance. After all, the cultivation methods he practiced were the real 9 heavens extreme. Bai Ling controlled the Slayer shrine. She would be the sharpest blade in Ling Zhao's hands. The stronger she was, the more dazzling her brilliance would be. Do you have a way to control the elders of the Slayer shrine? If not, Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with killing intent. He naturally didn't have much trust in a force that had taken control of him halfway. If the killing god imprint was unable to determine their life and death, the best method was to plant a soul imprint in their soul sea. Brother, don't worry. There is an oath in the killing god imprint. Any expert who joins the Killing God Palace cannot betray this oath. Bai Ling smiled sweetly, but there was some sadness in her eyes. Although she had taken control of the God-Killing Palace, it also meant that she would have to part ways with Ling Xiao. Furthermore, with the heritage of this palace, perhaps in the future, she could only be Ling Zhao's shadow, hiding in the dark and rarely seeing the light of day. If that's the case, then you can stay on Mount Qingyao. Ling Xiao casually handed Bai Ling a Qiankuan bag. There are 100 8th-grade saint-breaking elixirs inside. It's enough for you to enter the saint realm. Send a few people to the Jade Lake sacred ground and keep an eye on their movement. Yes, brother. Although Qin Yang and Zhu Jie were dead, and they were killed by Ling Xiao because of their evil identities. However, the Shadow Soul Palace most likely already knew the location of the Killing God Palace and all the arrangements. The reason why Ling Xiao did not ask Bai Ling to lead the group away was that he wanted to use this opportunity to see if he could lure out the God-Killing Palace. Secondly, he wanted to do the opposite. He wanted to use the spies of the Killing God Palace to test out all the experts of the Realm Lord Palace who were hiding in the dark. In the end, from the beginning, Ling Zhao's enemy was not the supreme inheritances of the Azure World, but the Realm Lord Palace. Whether it was the Killing God Palace or the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance, they were just the trump cards that Ling Zhao used to deal with the Realm Lord. If he could use the destruction of the Killing God Palace in exchange for the exposure of a God-killing palace, Ling Zhao would not hesitate at all. With Bai Ling's luck, the more hardships she encountered, the faster she would grow. Let's go. As the two figures disappeared, the entire domain fell into a dead silence once again. Only in the void above was the sound of thunder and sword chi. Young Master, Miss Bai Ling, at the peak of the Azure Jade Mountain, Yu Yi and Xia Jiming bowed and stood with complicated expressions. This was especially true for Yu Yi. Although Xia Chen had finally gotten his revenge, he should be happy. Inexplicably, he felt that everything in front of him seemed to have gone too smoothly. In the future, I'll leave the Killing God Palace to you. If you encounter any trouble, send me a message at any time. Ling Zhao took a deep look at Xia Jiming, then turned and walked towards the sky. When he disappeared, Bai Ling's expression turned completely cold. Yu Yi, send 2 elders to the Jade Lake Sacred Ground and keep an eye on the movements of the sect. Yes. Outside the Heavenly Thunder region, Ling Zhao was strolling in the clouds with a calm expression. Behind him, Bewitching Butterfly was dressed in black. Her figure was graceful, but there was a hint of resentment in her eyes. Young Master, I came all the way here. Aren't you going to reward me? I'm going to the realm of chaos. You go back to the Ling people first. After saying that, Ling Zhao did not hesitate at all. The moment he took a step forward, his figure disappeared. However, this time, he did not ride the dragon. After all, with Zhang Juji's current fear of him, if Ling Zhao appeared in the realm of chaos, there was no guarantee that he would not run away. Young Master. In the void above, Bewitching Butterfly opened her mouth slightly, her face full of resentment. However, in the end, she did not dare to disobey Ling Zhao. She could only stomp her feet resentfully and head in the direction of the realm of gods. Southwest of the Azure Heaven region, the realm of chaos. The reason this realm was called the Paradise of Evil Spirits was because of its wonderful geographical location. To the west of the realm of chaos was the famous Buddha Sea in the Azure Heaven region. It also had another name, the Adversity Sea. The reason why the Brahma Holy Land was established here was to suppress the evil spirits in the Adversity Sea. It was said that the end of the Adversity Sea was connected to another realm. Sealed in that realm was the evil race that even immortals and gods feared. To the south of the realm of chaos was the territory of the monster race. Tens of thousands of mountains were connected. Normally, no human cultivators would set foot in that realm. Because of that, the realm of chaos was chaotic all year round. Countless living beings who cultivated evil techniques and carried blood vengeance gathered there. Some of them were running away from their enemies, and some only wanted to kill. In short, this was a realm without order. Even Saint Stage experts did not dare to enter this realm. At this moment, in an ancient city to the north of the realm of chaos, 2 young men dressed in black robes were sitting in a winehouse by the street. They were drinking and chatting. Brother Chu, we feel like old friends at first sight. I've always wanted to know, why did you end up in the realm of chaos? One of the young men with a fair complexion and a wisp of demonic aura around him asked in a deep voice. Brother Juji, you don't know this. I'm in the realm of chaos to hide from my enemies. The other young man with a handsome appearance and slender eyes shook his head helplessly. There was a trace of vicissitudes on his face that did not match his age. Hiding from your enemies? Zhang Juji was stunned. Then, he sighed softly. When I saw Brother Chu's carefree and unrestrained manner, I thought you were just yearning for the freedom here. I didn't expect you and I are in the same boat. Brother Juji, you're also hiding from your enemies? Chapter 1383. Yes and No. In short, it's very complicated. Zhang Juji shook his head and smiled, his eyes full of resentment. In the past few days, a great demon had suddenly appeared in the Chaos Burial region. It liked to devour people's blood spirit. If it was in other regions, such a ferocious demon would have attracted many people from the righteous Tao. However, this was the Chaos Burial region, a paradise for demons. Thus, many cultivators were terrified, but there was nothing they could do. This ferocious demon was naturally formed by Yin and Zhang Juji's ancient sword. However, Yinyu's purpose was not only to recover from her injuries and cultivate demonic technique. More importantly, she wanted to search for people's souls and find the group of bandits who killed Su Shan back then. Needless to say, hard work paid off. After Yinyu devoured a Sky Bandit Alliance cultivator, she accidentally found some clues from back then. It was said that there was a group of cultivators in the Chaos Burial region who followed a young man called Chu Liuyan. This person was also known as the Bandit Commander and had an unparalleled reputation. However, this group of people were not evil people. Instead, they did righteous deeds of robbing the rich and helping the poor. However, for some unknown reason, Chu Liuyan suddenly disappeared 200 years ago. At the same time, a group of evil bandits appeared in the Chaos Burial region. They gathered many cultivators and formed the most tyrannical and ferocious force in this region, the Sky Bandit Alliance. Moreover, this group of people seemed to be secretly searching for traces of Chu Liuyan. It was a pity that they could not find the former bandit commander after 200 years had passed. However, just 10 days ago, Yinyu was recuperating in seclusion. Zhang Juji encountered the Sky Bandit Alliance cultivators killing cultivators. He immediately stepped forward and killed a group of supremacy cultivators. After that, he was chased all the way to the north of the Chaos Burial region and fell into a desperate situation. At the crucial moment, it was not Yinyu who woke up and saved him. It was this brother Chu, who changed his name to Chu Dao. Although the two of them were 200 years apart in age, their personalities were extremely similar. In just a few days, they regretted not meeting each other and confided in each other. When Yinyu woke up, she unexpectedly discovered that this brother Chu was extremely similar to the rumored bandit commander Chu Liuyan. It turned out that he had never left the Chaos Burial region. Instead, he changed his identity and appearance to hide in the dark. As for what happened 200 years ago, Yinyu still didn't know. After all, only the Heavenly Bandit Alliance's 9 commanders and Chu Liuyan knew the truth. In order not to arouse the suspicion of Zhang Juji and this brother Chu, Yinyu immediately sent a voice transmission to Ling Xiao and asked him to decide what to do next. Did you see that? This was the awesome aspect of the good fortune saint body. Wherever he went, he would encounter good fortune. The current Zhang Juji and Chu Liuyan could be said to be friends for life and death. If all of this had not been deliberately arranged by Ling Xiao, there would have been a thrilling story between the two of them. In this fantasy world, what could be more exciting than brothers working together to turn the tables after a chase? Chu Liuyan had a story, and Zhang Juji had Yinyu. It was reasonable. Oh? Brother Juji, is there anything that can't be said between us? Chu Liuyan shook his head and smiled. He raised the wine cup in front of him and drank it. The current Sky Bandits' union was incomparably rampant. They were the true source of evil in the Chaos Burial region. However, he could only watch on helplessly. He didn't dare to confront him directly. This was because there was a shocking secret hidden in his body. Until a while ago, when he met Zhang Juji by chance, he was immediately attracted by the loyalty and righteousness that Zhang Juji displayed. A young supremacy actually dared to confront the strongest evil force in the Chaos Burial region. This courage shocked him. This was also the first time Chu Liuyan had taken action in the past 200 years. He risked exposing his identity to save this young man. In his eyes, Zhang Juji was the rare light of righteousness in the Chaos Burial region. It was laughable that he, the dignified bandit marshal, had personally nurtured a group of evildoers who committed all kinds of evil and destroyed the reputation that he had accumulated for 100 years. However, everyone knew that he, Chu Liunian, was a traitor, but they didn't know that what happened back then wasn't his intention at all. Fortunately, that group of people who betrayed him didn't get what they wanted in the end. It could only be said that both sides suffered losses. Brother Chu, we hit it off immediately. Why would I hide anything from you? It's just that my matter is really complicated. Sigh. Zhang Juji sighed softly, and his eyes were cold. Back then, he was filled with passion when he walked out of the demon region. He wanted to make a name for himself in the Azure continent to comfort his mother's soul in heaven. However, he didn't expect that he would be stopped by that woman in red the moment he walked out of the demon region with Qing Mu's true teachings. Not only did that battle cause Zhang Juji's Dao heart to be covered in dust, but even senior sister Lei Yun was killed. However, although Zhang Juji escaped in a sorry state and fell into the demon abyss, he unexpectedly obtained the Nine Sons Buddha sword and took Yin Yu as his servant. Because of this, Zhang Juji increasingly felt that fate was on his side. However, it was because of this ancient Buddha sword that his immortal path truly fell into despair. Whether it was Hua Mingxi's scheme or Ling Zhao's forceful suppression, they almost caused his Dao heart to collapse. If it weren't for Yin Yu, he might have died in Dao Heaven City. Even so, his identity as the Sky Demon's general was still a predestined fate. Of course, if he could obtain the Sky Demon's relic that was sealed in the Daotian Academy, these setbacks could be ignored. However, at the last moment, he could only watch as the demonic treasure was right in front of him. He had no choice but to escape in a sorry state and was almost killed by Dao Heaven City's master. The current Zhang Juji was indeed completely famous in the Azure continent. Forget it, Brother Juji, it's fine if you don't want to say it. However, your name seems to be very similar to a great demon that recently shook the Azure continent. Chu Liunian smiled. Although he had never walked out of the burial ground, he had heard about the Azure continent's matters. Zhang Juji. There were countless people with the same name in the world, but this name was so unique that it was really unforgettable. Brother Chu, Zhang Juji's eyes narrowed slightly. He originally wanted to use an alias to get along with Chu Liunian. However, this elder brother of his really trusted him wholeheartedly. He didn't even hide his hatred for the Heavenly Bandit Alliance. The current Zhang Juji had indeed done many evil deeds, but he was still a righteous person in his heart and had a pure and kind nature. Thus, he didn't choose to lie to Chu Liunian. Moreover, this was the burial ground, where evil spirits were everywhere. There was no need to worry at all. Haha, Brother Nine Extremities, I still believe that seeing is believing, and hearing is false. There are too many things in this world that can't be helped. Sometimes, the evil reputation that a person bears only proves that he is moving forward, and not retreating. Chu Liunian shook his head and smiled. He raised his cup and clinked it with Zhang Juji's. People are ignorant and always spread false rumors. They unknowingly become the pawns of others. A true wise person doesn't fall into the river of love and doesn't believe in prejudice. Promise me. Don't be an ordinary person who depends on the rumors. If you want to scold someone, you have to do it gracefully. Brother Chu. Zhang Juji's eyes trembled, and he finally felt a trace of warmth in his heart. That's right. Only those who worked hard to move forward would bear the evil reputation. The higher one went, the fiercer the storm. All right, after drinking this cup of wine, I'll bring you to a place. When the time comes, I'll tell you my story. Chu Liunian smiled mysteriously. He raised his head and drank the wine. Then, he stood up and headed out of the city. Zhang Juji only hesitated for a moment before he raised his leg and followed. The current him was like a stray dog. Chu Liunyuan's appearance unknowingly gave him a lot of comfort. He didn't believe that this good elder brother of his would lie to him because his life was originally saved by Chu Liunyuan. Chapter 1384. Hurry up and follow me. Be careful or I'll whip you to death. What are you looking at? It's your honor to be able to serve the Sky Bandit Alliance. When you see the commanders later, answer them carefully. Otherwise, you'll die without a complete corpse. In front of a barren ancient mountain in the Chaos Burial Zone. A few middle-aged men in black held long whips in their hands as they ruthlessly whipped dozens of figures before them. These people were the great bandits of the Sky Bandit Alliance. They were in charge of capturing strong young men and bringing them into the Sky Bandit Alliance to serve as slaves and laborers. Everyone knew that the 9 commanders of the Sky Bandit Alliance were extremely vicious and evil. They rose to power 200 years ago, but no one knew their origins. Although 4 of the 9 were saints, they were far inferior to the many famous demons in the Chaos Burial Zone. However, the 9 of them were extremely cunning. Even now, no one knew where the Sky Bandit Alliance's sect was. At this moment, among the dozens of imprisoned figures, a young man dressed in black with an unparalleled celestial appearance was slowly walking forward. Compared to the fear and despair on the faces of the people around him, his expression was extremely calm without any ripples. Ling Xiao had already arrived in the Chaos Burial Zone a day ago. Although Yin suspected that Zhang Juji's brother Chu was the rumored bandit commander Chu Liunyuan, she could not verify it. Thus, Ling Xiao planned to start with the Sky Bandit Alliance first and thoroughly understand what happened back then before making a plan. But what surprised him was that the Sky Bandit Alliance experts he killed either did not know where the sect was or had a restriction planted in their souls that would shatter upon contact. It was obvious that the 9 commanders of the Sky Bandit Alliance placed great importance on their own safety. The more this was so, the more it proved that they must be hiding a great secret. Ever since Yin told him about Chu Liunyuan's existence through voice transmission, Ling Xiao vaguely guessed that this person with the surname Chu must have a great background. And the Sky Bandit Alliance was very likely related to Su Shan's death back then. To avoid alerting the enemy, Ling Xiao could only disguise himself as an imprisoned servant and let these Sky Bandit Alliance experts bring him into the Alliance's sect. This way, all the fog would naturally be cleared. As for Chu Liunyuan, with Yin watching over him, nothing would happen to him. Chu Liunyuan listened to this. Isn't this a destiny? Is it suitable? Come, cover their eyes. It wasn't until they arrived at an ancient forest deep in the mountains that the leader of the bandits suddenly shouted coldly. He took out some black cloth strips from his Qiankuan bag and covered everyone's eyes one by one. Then, everyone felt a wave of dizziness. When they took off the cloth again, a magnificent hall suddenly appeared in front of them. The entire palace was made of gold. It was magnificent and could be said to be extravagant. On the other hand, before the hall, numerous young men that had been captured like Ling Xiao and the others were dejected and pale. Obviously, they'd already expected their fate. All of you, go over there and wait for the commanders to arrive. The black-clothed bandit snorted coldly before he turned around and walked into the hall. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, was mixed in with the crowd, looking around at the ancient hall sect hidden behind the formation. What are you looking at? Be careful of me if you continue looking. As if sensing Ling Xiao's actions, one of the bandits shouted angrily. However, the moment Ling Xiao turned around, the bandit felt a chill run down his spine. A chill rose from the bottom of his feet, and he suddenly knelt on the ground. His head was drenched in cold sweat, and he couldn't stop trembling. Second MO, what's wrong with you? The surrounding Heavenly Bandit Alliance's experts immediately gathered around with strange looks on their faces. That bandit called Second MO actually foamed at the mouth and fainted on the ground. This is epilepsy, right? I didn't expect Second MO to be sick, The crowd looked at each other and kicked Second Mo harshly. Seeing that he didn't react, they then ordered people to carry him away. The originally noisy square quietened down once again. As for the young men who were captured and brought here, they were all sighing with despair on their faces. It's over. It's over. I heard that all the laborers that were captured by the Heavenly Bandit Alliance were either sent to the underground mines or fed with poison and sold to other forces as slaves. In any case, they were all living a life worse than death. It's over. I don't want to die. Shoo! Don't make a sound. Be careful not to be beaten to death by their stick. Hearing the discussions, Ling Zhao's face didn't have much of an expression. A force created by a few bandits couldn't be compared to the true top ancient sects in Qingtsang. Moreover, in such a chaotic region without order and rules, Ling Xiao didn't have the slightest concern. Any cultivator that survived in the chaotic burial region would more or less bear the burden of sin. These people didn't need any pity. Everyone is ready. Just as Ling Xiao closed his eyes and waited calmly, several footsteps suddenly came from the hall in the distance. Then, 7 figures in black walked out in a line. Their auras weren't weak, and they all had domineering expressions on their faces. Especially the man in the lead. His cultivation was at the 3rd level of the Saint Realm. A scar ran through his face, making him look extremely ferocious. Commander, everyone is here. There are a total of 300 people. The weakest among them is at the Emperor God Realm. The scarred man nodded slightly. His gaze swept past everyone's faces and finally stopped on Ling Xiao. At this moment, he could see that the young man in black standing in the crowd was too eye-catching. His celestial appearance was unparalleled and his temperament was unparalleled. There was even a faint gentle smile at the corner of his mouth. However, the pair of eyes that looked at him were indifferent, as if he was looking at a dead person. The scarred man suddenly felt a chill in his heart. You, come here. Everyone was stunned and followed the scarred man's gaze. In the next moment, their eyes suddenly narrowed. At this moment, Ling Xiao stepped forward with his hands behind his back. His posture didn't look like a captured slave at all. He was clearly a noble young master of an aristocratic family. He had an innate otherworldly temperament that was unique in the world. One look at him would make people revere him. Who are you? I'll give you a chance. Answer a few of my questions and perhaps I'll spare your life. Ling Zhao's indifferent words made the entire Sky Bandits Union fall into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the tall figure in black with shock, and their lips trembled slightly. They were clearly unable to figure out where exactly this young man at the Exalt realm got the confidence to actually dare to speak to the great commander of the Heavenly Bandit Alliance in such a manner. Finally, someone in the crowd couldn't help but sneer. Then, waves of laughter instantly resounded through the entire ancient hall. Only the great commander of the Sky Bandits Union looked solemn. His eyes were filled with uneasiness. Inexplicably, the group of bandits who were laughing wildly suddenly fell silent. Their faces were full of confusion. Why was the great commander terrified? Chapter 1385. Who exactly are you? The great commander of the Heavenly Bandits Alliance was called Chen He, a 3rd-level Saint Realm expert. Although there were a few Supreme Being demons hiding in the Chaos Burial Zone, their enemies were also famous figures in the Azure Continent. They did not dare to show themselves easily. A Saint Realm expert like Chen He, who was originally unknown, suddenly appeared in the Chaos Burial Zone. He was the overlord of this region on the surface. Of course, the Heavenly Bandits Alliance was able to rise so quickly in just 200 years not only because of this great commander, but also because of the other 8 great commanders. The weakest of the 9 great bandits was at the peak of the Supreme Being realm, and there were 4 saints. One could imagine how powerful they were when gathered together. Moreover, the 9 of them were cautious and knew when to advance and retreat. If not for the fact that Ling Xiao was only at the Supreme Being realm and looked harmless, it would be difficult for him to sneak into this sect. Back then, young Master Su Shan of the Heavenly Saint Merchant Alliance was killed by you, right? Ling Xiao did not care about Chen He's doubts at all. There was still a gentle smile on his face. Boy, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Beside Chen He, the fourth commander of the Heavenly Bandits Alliance, Guanda, suddenly shouted coldly. The moment he took a step forward, his Saint Realm aura suddenly descended. His figure directly shattered the void and appeared in front of Ling Xiao. In the next instant, he struck out with his palm. There seemed to be Tao runes condensing in his palm, and divine power gushed out. From the moment Ling Xiao mentioned Su Shan's name, the great bandits of the Azure Continent already knew where he came from. It was obvious that the Su clan was still unwilling to give up after so many years. But why would they send such a young man with a mere Supreme Being realm cultivation to die here? Guanda could not figure it out, but it did not stop him from killing first and thinking later. Boom! However, the moment Guanda's palm pressed down, the ferocious look on his face suddenly froze. At this moment, he seemed to see a hint of mockery in the young man's eyes. Then, his palm came into contact with an extremely hard body. Buzz! Monstrous demonic chi surged into the sky, covering all directions. In front of Ling Xiao, a terrifying figure that was 10 feet tall broke through the air, grabbing Guanda's hand in a tight grip. It was a figure filled with demonic will. It was majestic and majestic, like a demonic beast, emitting endless ferocity. Especially his eyes, they were empty, cold, and indifferent. He was like a combat puppet that was completely devoid of vitality, yet indescribably ghastly. Crack! The ear-piercing sound of broken bones quietly resounded, and Guanda's expression almost instantly turned sinister. But before he could struggle, the demonic shadow suddenly threw out a punch. It was like a falling star, shattering the void and landing heavily on his chest. Pucci! How could Guan, who had reached the first-grade Saint Realm, be a match for Xiong Huan, who had fused with the Corpse Pearl? Therefore, not only did the punch penetrate his chest, it even tore off his arm that was in Xiong Huan's hand. Gulp! The heavens and the earth suddenly went silent. Only Guanda fell into a pool of blood, and he let out waves of painful and heavy gasps. It seems that you don't like this friendly method very much. Just as everyone's faces were filled with shock and fear, a gentle and indifferent voice suddenly came from behind the tall demonic figure. Ling Xiao lifted his foot and walked out from behind Xiong Huan with a bright, warm, and clear smile on his face. But, just as he appeared beside Guanda, 10,000 soul runes suddenly rippled in his eyes and shrouded the latter's soul sea. Pucci! However, just as Ling Xiao had expected, the soul seas of these commanders of the Sky Bandits Alliance had been sealed by someone. The slightest touch would cause their heads to explode immediately. Looking at the bodies whose bodies and soul seas had collapsed together, everyone's face was already incomparably pale. What kind of power was the Sky Bandits Alliance? It was a well-known evil path in the realm of burial disorder. They burned, killed, robbed, and committed all kinds of crimes. Even if they were also evil spirits, they would be afraid when they saw the 9 commanders and would not dare to act rashly. However, compared to the young man before them, their methods were still much gentler. Young man, who exactly are you? Chen He took a deep breath, his face ashen. The reason he didn't stop Guanda just now was to test Ling Xiao's strength. Now it seemed that this young man had come prepared. A Saint Realm demonic servant, and his combat strength should be at the 7th or 8th rank of the Saint Realm. Although it was a little troublesome, the situation was still under control. Who among you is willing to answer my question? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, his indifferent eyes sweeping across the 6 commanders one by one. It seemed that the remaining 2 commanders of the Sky Bandits Alliance were not in the alliance. However, as long as Ling Xiao didn't reveal his identity as the young master of the Ling people, these people would only think that he was an assassin sent by the Su clan. Even if they tipped off Ling Xiao, it wouldn't be a loss for him. He would just have to spend more effort. Kid, don't be too arrogant. This is our Sky Bandits alliance. Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have a Saint Realm servant? The remaining commanders of the Sky Bandits alliance beside Chen, he shouted coldly. What happened back then was a dead knot that couldn't be reconciled. Su Shan's death was a fatal blow to the Su clan. Therefore, Chen He and the others had been hiding in the burial zone all these years, being careful, as they were worried that the Su clan would come knocking on their door one day. In the end, although the 9 of them had some reputation in the burial zone, they were still like ants compared to the colossus that was the Sky Saint Business Alliance. It seems that you still don't see the situation clearly. Ling Xiao sighed softly. With a thought, a few more figures appeared in front of him. They all wore the same black robes embroidered with bloody clouds, looking extremely mysterious. Moreover, the auras of these people caused even Chen He to feel a wave of fear. Endless demonic intent covered the sky, filled with boundless killing intent. They were Brute Devil, Shirpatian, Wunye, Ning Chuan, Phoenix Rouge, and the others. The 5 of them had made breakthroughs in their cultivation, especially Ning Chuan and Phoenix Rouge, who were originally heavenly mandate bodies. It was naturally easy for them to cross realms and kill enemies. With the strength of the 6 commanders, if they were to face Xiong Huan alone, they might have some chance of winning. However, the people in front of them all had shocking demonic intents and terrifying cultivation. It would be difficult for them to win. In fact, even the 2 exalted realm cultivators gave Chen He an enormous amount of pressure. It was obvious that the 2 of them were hiding extremely terrifying trump cards. Of course, the reason why Ling Xiao didn't rush to summon the 2 corpse puppets was because he could feel that there was still an aura hidden in the Sky Bandits alliance. It should be in the earthly sovereign realm. Obviously, this person was the biggest reliance of Chen He and the others. As for the restriction in their soul seas, it was very likely that it was the work of this supreme being expert. Can we talk now? Ling Xiao smiled eerily and looked up at Chen He. He saw that although the latter was shocked, there wasn't much fear. I don't know what you are talking about. Young man, if you retreat now, I can pretend that nothing happened, but kill them all. Before Chen He could finish speaking, Ling Xiao waved his hand lightly, and a brilliant smile suddenly bloomed on his face. Chapter 1386. Buzz. A buzzing sound suddenly resounded through the world. Xiong Huan and the others dashed out and pounced on Chen He. Ning Chuan, in particular, had a bloodthirsty gleam in his eyes. Wherever his gaze landed, the void suddenly exploded. An ancient formation that flickered with bloody radiance appeared out of thin air. The formation intent within it actually caused the Saint Stage commanders to feel their hearts palpitate. As for Feng Rouge's body, it was suffused with jade mist. All the Heavenly Bandit Union's disciples that came within 30 meters of her would strangely discover that their bodies and souls had suddenly shattered inch by inch. Brat, do you really think my Sky Bandit Alliance is afraid of you? Chen He gnashed his teeth fiercely. His eyes were filled with shock and fury as he looked at the plaza that had instantly turned into hell. He had guessed that an exalted realm youth must have something to rely on since he dared to come alone. However, it would appear that he had still underestimated the youth's means. Roar! However, before Chen He could ponder for too long, a deafening roar suddenly sounded from above his head. Xiong Huan fell from the sky like an ancient giant bear. He opened his bloody mouth in anger and wanted to swallow Chen He in one gulp. Second brother! Kill that black-clothed youth. Killing intent surged in Chen He's eyes. He suddenly clenched his hand and an ancient sword slashed down from the sky, blooming with extreme blade radiance. At this moment, he already knew that the group of people before him were the youth's servants. As long as he killed the youth, these people would probably lose their will to fight. Of course, even though the Sky Bandit Alliance disciples were being slaughtered, he still did not panic. Although he was now the leader of the Sky Bandit Alliance, he still had to listen to Elder Su. With Elder Su around, a few mere Saint Stage experts would not be able to cause any trouble. Buzz! Hearing this, the second commander of the Sky Bandit Alliance, Sun Lanzi, who was originally fighting the brute devil, immediately shouted coldly. Countless wind marks lingered on the spirit's sword in his hand and forced the brute devil to take a step back. He took the opportunity to leave the battlefield and rushed toward Ling Xiao. A killing aura suddenly appeared in the vast sky. A gust of wind suddenly arrived, cold and austere. Ling Xiao calmly looked at the figure approaching with a sword in hand. There was not the slightest bit of panic on his face. Although the second commander of the Sky Bandits Alliance had comprehended the Wind Dao Law, compared to Ling Xiao's perfected Dao Law, the wisp of Wind Dao Law was simply too weak. First-rank Saint Realm cultivators had no luck. Compared to Azure Sun, Sun Lanzi's divine will was simply too sloppy, and it posed no threat at all. Brat, you're courting death. At that moment, Sun Lanzi stepped down from the sky and slashed out with the ancient sword in his hand. Wisps of wind swirled around the tip of the sword, turning into a sword shadow that was hundreds of meters long, slashing through the sky. A torrent of holy will fell from the sky. Before the tip of the sword arrived, countless cracks had already appeared on the bluestone of the entire square. Even the God Emperor and honorable realm servants behind Ling Xiao were pressed to the ground by the sword force. They vomited blood and died. Obviously, Sun Lanzi had utilized his full strength in this attack. But even so, Ling Xiao still stood calmly in place. His black clothes fluttered, and the dark patterns on them burned brightly. In the next moment, he stretched out his hand, and the void behind him shattered. 10 ancient swords that flickered with radiance appeared out of thin air, each of them miraculous. The ear-piercing sword hum resounded for thousands of miles, and the wind and clouds changed drastically. Then, Ling Xiao gently waved his hand. The divine light on the 10 swords suddenly flourished, and they directly slashed upward with the momentum to slash through the sky. Around each of the ancient swords, countless strange phenomena were manifested. Time seemed to have frozen, and the sword force that Sun Lanzi had swung out was completely penetrated by Ling Xiao's 3-sword strike. The remaining 7 swords carried the momentum to slay immortals and gods, and they traversed the vast sea. Sun Lanzi's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to dodge and retreat, he felt the entire void suddenly freeze. Above his head, there seemed to be an ancient formation that descended with a majestic momentum that could suppress heaven and earth. Pucci. As expected, the 7 swords pierced the sky with boundless sharpness and directly tore Sun Lanzi's figure apart, turning him into a rain of blood that sprinkled down. Heaven and earth fell silent. Even Chun He, who was with Professor Xiong Huan, had a look of intense shock and fear on his face. With the cultivation of the venerable realm, he killed a saint with a wave of his hand. What kind of heavenly talent and domineering momentum was this? One had to know that the gap between the venerable realm and the saint realm was originally a natural chasm of cultivation. Many people were even trapped in the venerable realm for their entire lives and did not dare to easily try to break through the saint tribulation. The biggest difference between the two realms was the saint runes. People in the venerable realm merged with the spirit chi of heaven and earth, and their own spiritual energy was stored in the Dan Sea. The saint tribulation, on the other hand, was to temper the physical body and condense the saint runes to attach to the Dan Sea, causing the spiritual energy of a cultivator to carry a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Moreover, the spiritual energy in the Dan-sea of a Saint Realm expert who had condensed the Saint runes was several times more powerful than that of an Venerable Realm expert. As for the two Saint runes, it was a whole new world. In short, the more Saint runes one had, the more terrifying the power of the great Tao contained in the attack, and the more powerful the spiritual energy stored in the Dan-sea. It was not that an Venerable Realm expert had never killed a Saint Realm expert. However, those who could kill a Saint Realm expert with the cultivation of the Venerable Realm were all true monsters in this world. How was this possible? Who exactly was this young man? With his talent, it was impossible for him to be a nobody. What kind of existence did the Su family invite this time? Boom! Just as everyone was in shock and fear, a terrifying aura suddenly shot into the sky from the depths of the Sky Bandit Alliance's main hall. A black-robed figure quietly appeared in the sky. The spiritual light around him was glaring like the sun, and he revealed an indestructible divine aura. He stood in the sky calmly, but his gaze alone was enough to make one's heart tremble, and they did not dare to look directly at him. "You've finally appeared?" Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the figure that had suddenly appeared. There was still a slight smile on his face. Now, it seemed that this person was the true controller behind the Sky Bandit Alliance. Although a third-grade Earth Sovereign was not considered the top of the world, it was still a supreme existence in Chaos Burial Ground. However, he did not know what kind of relationship he had with Chu Liunyan or Su Shan. "Young man, tell me who you are." The elder looked down at Ling Xiao with an indifferent expression. He did not care about a supremacy at all. However, he did not act rashly at this moment. After all, Ling Xiao's aura alone was not something that an ordinary ancient clan could nurture. This young man must have a great background. Let me guess. You must have something to do with Su Shan's death back then. Ling Xiao smiled. At this moment, he already had a vague guess in his heart. If the person who kidnapped Su Shan was really Chu Liunyan, then the former's death must have something to do with this elder before him. After all, a hero bandit should not do something as despicable as killing a hostage. The only possibility was that someone had taken a fancy to the Su family's wealth and wanted to take it all for himself. However, Chu Liunyan was blessed with providence and did not die. The powerful figures who originally followed him came to Chaos Burial Ground to hide from the Su family's pursuit. However, it now seemed that the wealth that the Su family handed over back then was most likely still in Chu Liunyan's hands. Otherwise, he would not have had to change his name and live an ignoble existence. Chapter 1387. Given Chu Liunyan's reputation back then, the Su family would be able to find out what he had done with just a little investigation. However, even the Su family would not have thought that the bandits who had kidnapped Su Shan had already parted ways and were on opposing side. Although Chu Liunyan had obtained the treasures, he was not the real culprit behind Su Shan's death. The old man and the 9 bandits should have betrayed Chu Liunyan but did not get what they wanted in the end. It's fine if you don't say anything. I have 1,000 ways to make you speak." The old man in black snorted. The moment he took a step forward, there seemed to be Tao rhymes intertwining around him. Even the fate of the entire world was quietly changing at this moment. Outside his body, the rules fell with dazzling brilliance. He was like a deity that contained the divinity of Avicania. This kind of brilliance was so dazzling that the god thearchs and supremes could only see a sun falling from the sky and covering the figure of the young man in black. In front of an earthly sovereign expert, an exalted realm expert was nothing more than an ant. Boom! Heaven and earth were overturned and thousands of Daos were reborn. Thousands of divine scenes appeared in the sky, and the mountains and rivers were shattered. Every ray of light was a terrifying force that could suppress thousands of worlds. This scene was extremely shocking. The people who were originally fighting unconsciously stopped their attacks at this moment and turned to look in the direction of the divine brilliance. However, what surprised Chen He and the rest was that no matter whether it was Xiong Huan, Shi Patian, Phoenix Rouge, or Ning Chuan, there was no trace of panic on their faces. This did not seem to make sense. Their master had been killed, yet these servants were still able to remain so calm and indifferent. Was it because they were determined, or because they had been oppressed enough, or because they had something to rely on? Of course, given Phoenix Rouge and the rest's understanding of Ling Xiao, what could a heavenly supreme do, let alone an earth supreme? How many people in this world could fight against the combat power of those two corpse puppets? Boom! Finally, the brilliance dissipated and the Tao pattern calmed down. Immediately after, there was a series of gasps in front of the hall. The scene of Ling Xiao being crushed on the spot, as everyone had expected, did not happen. On the contrary, the black-clothed old man that was boundlessly arrogant earlier was actually held by the neck from behind by a figure that similarly wore a black robe with blood clouds imprinted on it, and he was suspended in midair without moving at all like a dead dog. The Sky Bandit Union's supremacy was also dumbfounded. Just now, he descended from the sky and pressed down with his palm. In his opinion, it was impossible for an exalted realm youth to resist his attack. However, at the critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and instantly disintegrated his palm attack. Before the earthly sovereign could react, he felt a surge of divine power coming from behind him. Even with his strength, he dared not make the slightest movement. The fear that came from the bottom of his heart almost caused his Tao heart to collapse. Sky Supreme. Moreover, they were two heavenly sovereigns. Gulp. A trace of despair finally appeared on the faces of Chen He and the others. This was especially true for Elder Su. In their eyes, he was a godlike existence with vast and mighty heavenly might. However, he could not even withstand a single blow. At this moment, Elder Su's head would probably be crushed immediately if that youth gave the order. How could it be? More than 200 years had passed. Why would the Su family suddenly send two sky sovereigns to seek revenge? Moreover, Chu Liunian was the main culprit back then. They had always been hiding in the dark and careful. How did they expose their identities? Actually, it was not that they were not careful enough. It was just that Ling Xiao was too familiar with these schemes. Wherever there was a coincidence, there must be something fishy hidden. Chu Liunian went missing, and the Sky Bandit Union appeared out of nowhere to secretly search for the bandit marshal's whereabouts. Was it reasonable? Of course, Ling Xiao had previously guessed that Chu Liunian was most likely the destined one, so the opportunity back then was most likely with him. However, the destined one itself meant a variable. To be on the safe side, Ling Xiao decided to come to the Sky Bandit Union to investigate the situation first before cutting off that leak. Can we talk now? Ling Xiao raised his foot and walked in front of the black-robed old man, smiling faintly. What's there to talk about? If you want to kill me or torture me, it's all up to you, the old man snorted coldly. However, before he could finish his sentence, Ling Xiao threw a punch at him, instantly shattering all of his teeth. Fresh blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and that elder's face was almost the color of pig liver. Although this punch was not enough to threaten a supreme being expert, it was still extremely insulting. Did I ask you? Ling Xiao smiled warmly and turned to look at Chen He and the rest. Does anyone want to talk? If these people could betray Chu Liunian, they could betray anyone. Habitual betrayal referred to. Once a person tasted the sweetness of betrayal, they would break their bottom line again and eventually become slaves to their desires. Not talking? All right. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and waved his hand lightly. Kill. Buzz. Before him, Ancestor Ye's corpse puppet instantly vanished on the spot. When it reappeared, it was directly above the head of one of the Sky Bandit Alliance's commanders. With a punch, it shattered the commander and the space around him into nothingness. His figure quickly appeared behind the next commander. With Ancestor Ye's corpse puppets cultivation, not to mention these sage and paragon realm cultivators, even earthly supremes did not have much room to resist. This one-sided massacre finally broke the hearts of the Sky Bandit Alliance cultivators. I'll talk. One of the pale-faced middle-aged men, whose cultivation was only at the 9th stage Paragon realm, knelt on the ground with a plop. Behind him, Ancestor Ye's outstretched palms silently froze, and his figure stood in the void without any signs of life. Lu Dalwan, how dare you say that I'll... The black-robed elder's eyes narrowed, but before he could finish speaking, Ling Xiao punched him again and smashed his lips. The black-robed elder's heart was stifled at this moment. However, since this young man did not even know him, it was very likely that he was not from the Su clan. He might have come to the Sky Bandit Alliance to investigate the Su clan's fortune. Once someone told him that the fortune was not in the Sky Bandit Alliance's hands, do you think there was any need for them to live? Therefore, sometimes, silence could save one's life. When a person lost his value, he would lose his opportunity. What do you want to say? Ling Xiao walked in front of Lu Dalwan, her expression extremely gentle. Young master back then, Su, plop. At this moment, Chun He, who was beside Lu Dalwan, suddenly knelt on the ground. Young master, Chun He is willing to lead the Sky Bandit Alliance to pledge loyalty to you. I hope that you will be magnanimous and spare our lives. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded slowly. That will depend on whether you can satisfy me. Chapter 1388. What do you want to know? As long as it's something I know, I'll tell you everything. Chen He propped his head on the ground with a respectful expression. How did Su Shan die back then? And where are the treasures that the Su family handed over? Ling Zhao's gaze was cold. He was not very interested in the Su family's young master. However, the price that the Su family paid back then was the key to Ling Zhao's game of chess. The current Sky Saint Business Alliance was already filled with undercurrent. With the Lu and Hua families' power, there would be a fight for the position of alliance leader sooner or later. What Ling Xiao wanted to do was to use this opportunity to pave the way for Su Yan's ascension. Back then, we followed Marshal Chu and captured the Su family's young master, Su Shan. We originally wanted to use this to ask for a large sum of ransom from the Sky Saint Business Alliance, but Chen He's eyes narrowed as he looked at the old man in black with some fear. It was him, Su Luan. He was the one who found us and coerced us into killing Marshal Chu so that we could take the treasures for ourselves. Marshal Chu Liunyan? Ling Xiao nodded and smiled lightly. This plot was not much different from what he had guessed. The only difference was that Su Luan's background was more complicated than what Ling Xiao had expected. Where are the treasures? The treasures were taken away by Marshal Chu. Chen He's face darkened, and he was clearly angry. Back then, they had racked their brains to frame Chu Liunyan for this matter and then kill him. This way, they could use the Su family's foundation to live freely. However, they did not expect that Chu Liunyan would sense something at the critical moment and hide the treasures in advance. Not only did he escape their pursuit, but he had also completely disappeared without a trace all these years. So, the seal in your soul sea is also Elder Su's doing? Ling Xiao turned to look at Su Luan with a warm smile. In the entire Qing Tsang Empire, those who truly understood the soul seal technique were mostly from the Ghost Clan. Although there were some strong cultivators in the Human Clan who were proficient in the Soul Dao, they could not form a soul seal. Otherwise, Chun He and the rest would not have betrayed Su Luan so easily. Humph, brat, so what if you know what happened back then? The Su family's foundation isn't in the Sky Bandits Union. You're just drawing water with a bamboo basket. Su Luan snorted coldly, and his face returned to normal. From the moment he killed Su Shan and allowed Chu Liunian to escape, he knew that he would not let this matter rest. With Chu Liunian's talent and the Su family's foundation, she would step into the first stage of a supreme martial artist sooner or later. At that time, whether it was him, Chern He and the others, they would all have to face the fury of this bandit commander. Thus, Su Luan ordered Chen He and the rest to establish the Heavenly Bandit Union and recruit disciples without restraint. Firstly, it was to guard against the Su family. Secondly, it was to deal with Chu Liunian. However, Su Luan would never have dreamed that after hiding in the burial zone for 200 years, the one who came was not the Su family or Chu Liunian, but the mysterious young man in front of him. Why do you think that I can't find Chu Liunian? Ling Xiao shook his head and signaled the martial progenitor's corpse puppet to put Su Luan down. Why you found Chu Liunian? Then why are you still? Su Luan's eyes narrowed and his face was full of confusion. If Ling Xiao was after the Su family's foundation, why did he take the extra step of killing his way into the Heavenly Bandit Union? Why do you think that I want the Su family's foundation? Ling Xiao shook his head again. Although the Su family's foundation was deep, it was not very tempting to the current Ling Xiao. After all, it was impossible for the clan to have a supreme weapon, and Ling Xiao did not lack a divine weapon at all. He wanted these spiritual treasures only because he wanted to plot against the Lu family. What? You? To be honest, Su Luan was really dumbfounded at this point. This young man is not seeking revenge for Chu Liunian or the Su family's foundation. Could it be the righteous path? This young man must be an elite of the righteous path. He came here today purely to eradicate evil. Elder Su, you should be from the Su family, right? Ling Xiao pondered for a moment before he suddenly asked. Humph. Boss Su, you don't have to be so cautious. I'm here today to give you a great opportunity. Opportunity? Kid, who exactly are you? It doesn't matter who I am, but I can tell you very clearly that I have no relationship with Chu Liunian and the Su family. In fact, I have a grudge against them. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. If Su Luan was really from the Su family and set Su Shan up like this, he must have a great grudge against the Su family. Since Ling Xiao wanted to place Su Yan in the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance, he still had to prepare a lot of backup plans. At the very least, he had to be careful about her identity. Of course, if this old man was not proficient in the Tao of Souls, Ling Xiao would not even need to talk to him. He would just search him directly. Grudge? Then why are you? Elder Su, my patience is limited. Tell me your identity, and we might still have a chance to talk. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed, and a cold aura circulated around him. An invisible force fell from the sky, and Wu Zu's figure reappeared behind Su Luan. He raised his hand again and held Su Luan in midair. Su Luan's lips trembled slightly, and he gritted his teeth. Yes, I'm from the Su family, and I'm from the direct line of descent. But back then, the current head of the Su family, Su Buqian, deliberately set up my family members in order to fight for the position of the head of the family. He forced my family members into a desperate situation, and countless of them died. My family members had no choice but to retreat to a dangerous place in the lower realm. Oh? Retreat to the lower realm? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. The lower realm that Elder Su is talking about, can it be the world of dead souls? How did you know? If that's the case, then I have a way to let Elder Su's family regain the position of the head of the Su family. Moreover, you might even be able to become the leader of the Heavenly Saint Alliance. Ling Xiao smiled evilly. As a direct line of descent, Su Luan and the rest must have a high status in the Su family. If Su Buqian had managed the Su family well in the past 200 years, even if Su Luan returned to the Su family, he would not be able to escape death. However, this head of the Su family not only failed to lead the family to glory, but also caused the family to lose all its heritage and become the last of the three ancient families, a laughingstock. The ancestors of the Su family must have missed Su Luan's lineage very much. If, now that Su Luan's lineage had a peerless genius, at least the position of the head of the family would be within his reach. What? You. Actually, the conflict between me and the Su family is mainly because of the current head of the Su family. I once heard that a direct line of descent of the Su family had wandered to the lower realm. I was going to look for him, but I didn't expect. Ling Xiao smiled bitterly, and then continued, Elder Su, if you want revenge, I can give you a chance. But you must submit to me. Submit to you? Seeing the evil look on Ling Xiao's face, Su Luan suddenly understood. How can I believe you? Elder Su, do you have any other choice? Ling Xiao's expression was calm and his smile was sincere. The next moment, his eyes suddenly turned cold. I called you Elder Su because of my temperament. I have always respected the old and loved the young. But if you really think that I can't kill the young master of the Su family without you, then you can die now. Chapter 1389. What? Su Luan's body trembled, especially when he felt the sudden surge of supreme power behind him. His face turned pale immediately. Open your spiritual soul and be my soul slave, or die. Ling Xiao did not hesitate at all. Thousands of soul inscriptions suddenly bloomed in his eyes. They were as mysterious as the deep sea of stars. Buzz. Su Luan felt his soul sea tremble. At this time, he did not know whether to resist or obey. In the end, Ling Xiao planted a soul seal in him. Plant a soul seal in their soul seas. Ling Xiao looked indifferent. He turned his head and looked at the countless figures standing in front of the hall. Kill the rest. Yes. Xiong Huan and the others bowed, while Ling Xiao walked down the mountain. From today onwards, the Sky Bandits Alliance will be renamed as the Supreme Celestial Palace. Su Luan, I give you 1 year to unify the zone of mass grave. After 1 year, I will help you return to the Su family. Don't worry, I will order a heavenly sovereign to secretly assist you. Yes, Master. Su Luan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not dare to have the slightest objection. Suddenly, the Sky Bandits Alliance was filled with murderous cries. Those who did not have a soul seal were killed on the spot by Xiong Huan and the others. At the foot of the barren mountain, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back. Until there were several sounds of wind behind him, Ling Xiao waved his hand and put Ning Chuan, Phoenix Rouge, and the others into the realm. At this time, he left Ancestor Yi in the zone of mass graves to deal with the heavenly sovereigns hiding in the dark. With Su Luan's scheming means, 1 year should be enough for him to unify the zone of mass graves and become the master of the zone. At that time, the world of souls would be completely opened. What Ling Xiao wanted to do was not only to let Su Luan and Su Yan return to the Su family together, but also to have the entire Su family line the streets to welcome them. Yes, Su Yan was not a member of the Su family, but Su Luan was a legitimate member of the Su family. If the two of them returned together, no one would doubt Su Yan's identity. As for how to get the entire Su family to line the streets to welcome them? Haha, believe me, the Su family has no choice. Although the Chaos Burial region was a chaotic region, its location could be said to be excellent. Now, although Ling Xiao had many people of destiny following him, they still needed time to grow. Moreover, when the war began, there would eventually be people who would be sacrificed. Therefore, Ling Xiao needed a sect to be his strength in conquering this world. There would be a day when the Supreme Divine Palace would resound throughout the Azure Sky continent and become the center of attention. Bandit Commander Chu Liunyan, I wonder what level your cultivation has reached after 200 years. Ling Xiao smiled and looked down at the identity token that Su Luan had just given him. His eyes were cold and gloomy. At this point, he had already received Yin Yu's voice transmission, saying that Chu Liunyan and Zhang Juji had headed to the northwest of the Chaos Burial region, to a desolate valley near the Adversity Sea. According to Ling Zhao's guess, it was very likely that Chu Liunyan's real treasure was hidden there. Given Chu Liunyan's character, he would definitely not carry such a treasure with him. This was because once his identity was exposed, he would no longer have anything to rely on. The only way was to hide the treasure elsewhere. Even if they were captured, they would still be able to advance and retreat freely. They could be soft or hard. At the same time, at the shore of the Adversity Sea, Chu Liunyan stood in front of a desolate valley. Behind him, Zhang Juji frowned slightly. He was clearly puzzled as to why Brother Chu had brought him here. "Brother Chu, this is... Brother Juji, we hit it off at first sight. Now, in this azure sky continent, you are the only person I can trust." Chu Liunyan's voice was calm and filled with vicissitudes. "Brother Chu, actually, Brother Juji, you don't have to say anything. I believe in my own judgment." Chu Liunyan smiled faintly and turned to look at Zhang Juji. "Actually, I have a blood feud with the Heavenly Bandit Alliance. Before I met you, I had always been hesitant. But now, as long as I don't destroy the Heavenly Bandit Alliance, my Tao heart will always be flawed. As a result, my cultivation has been unable to break through. Brother Chu, actually, I was originally the Azure Sky Bandit commander. My companions betrayed me 200 years ago, and I ended up in this state that is neither human nor ghost. In this valley, there are countless numinous treasures that I hid. Brother Juji, I need you to promise me something." Chu Liunyan took a deep breath, and his face was solemn. The current Heavenly Bandit Alliance was already flourishing by the day. If he continued to hesitate, it would be very difficult for him to have the chance to kill his enemy. Back then, Chen He and the rest's betrayal caused Chu Liunyan to lose his dignity as a bandit commander. Now, this group of former followers had established a force that was flourishing. His whereabouts would be discovered sooner or later. Originally, Chu Liunyan was worried that the Su family's heritage would fall into Chen He's hands if he failed. He was indignant. However, Zhang Juji's appearance gave him a bold idea. If he died in the Heavenly Bandit Alliance in the end, Zhang Juji could fulfill his dying wish. In any case, these numinous treasures definitely could not fall into the hands of those traitors. Of course, if he could kill Chen He and the rest, he would send their heads and the treasures back to the Su family to make up for the guilt in his heart. "Brother Chu, tell me. As long as I can do it, I'll do it." Zhang Juji was silent for a moment before nodding. This feeling of being trusted made him extremely touched. This was especially so when he roughly guessed that this bandit commander most likely knew his identity from Chu Liunyan's word. "I'll tell you how to open this treasure later. If I die, take all these numinous treasures away and help me pass them to the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance's Su family. If I can return safely, I'll do this personally." Chu Liunyan sighed softly. In the past 200 years, it was not that he had not thought of returning these numinous treasures to the Su family. However, not to mention whether the Su family would believe him, just the risk of this trip was not something that Chu Liunyan could bear. All these years, he vaguely felt that there was definitely a traitor in the Su family who colluded with Chen He. He had to get to the bottom of this matter and find the real culprit who killed Su Shan. Only then could he give the Su family and himself an explanation. Heavenly Saint Business Alliance? The Su family? Zhang Juji focused his eyes, and a beautiful face instantly appeared in his mind. Hua Mingxi. If this senior sister didn't purposely frame him back then, he wouldn't have ended up in this state. Although he didn't know what grudges Chu Liunyan had with the Su family, if he could have some interactions with the Su family and slowly plot, he might be able to expose Hua Mingxi's hypocrisy. "Juji, can you do it? Brother Chu, I swear on my Tao heart that I won't let you down." Zhang Juji nodded. Compared to the fortune of the numinous treasures, what he wanted now was to destroy Hua Mingxi's reputation. Good. I really didn't misjudge you. This is my natal talisman. Once there are any changes, immediately take the treasures and leave. Don't delay. Chu Liunyan handed Zhang Juji a golden talisman and walked into the valley first. Follow me. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.